Fields were reduced to smoking earth. Houses had been burnt before the French army arrived. It was a resistance of sorts, but no one was fighting. The Russians, the serfs and gentry, they just waited.
General Kutuzov didn't see any point. After the rout at Borodino, the Russians were already weak. The old boy knew he couldn't defend Moscow. What a prize for the French. The holy city of Mother Russia, abandoned for Napoleon to just walk in.
I first saw Moscow from a distance. Spires and golden onion domes, cathedrals and palaces. No wonder the doctor had wanted to go there. But already a column of smoke was billowing up from the east of the city. Oh, come on! This long moment can't last forever. You're just playing it out. Who are you, really?
Who am I today? Or yesterday? In this moment, I'm the interrogator. Il Grande Inquisitore.
You know what I mean.
We all have to find our motivation, monsieur. For some people, it starts with the right shoes.
That's just the part you're playing. I mean the real you. Or isn't there a real person at all?
We'll see, won't we?
I hope so.
Well, go on then. Get it over with. The final act.
The gates of Moscow were shut. There was no problem getting inside. They were only stopping people getting out. But I had to leave Semyon's horse, and that wasn't easy. The streets were under French martial law with a strict curfew, which let the French patrols get on with their looting. They were so busy clearing out the contents of the churches that it was easy to slip past. The one thing with looking for the doctor is that it's a fair bet he'll always be at the heart of things. So that meant getting into the walled Kremlin. I didn't waste time. I marched through the deserted marketplace on Red Square up to the gate tower and told the drunken officer in charge that I had information for the Emperor. I think they let me in because I wasn't Russian, and thanks to the TARDIS, my French was good. Inside, the Kremlin was like a small city in its own right. They led me past an arsenal and more churches, and sure enough, there was the TARDIS itself, parked on the steps of another great palace. We went through chambers with elaborately painted walls and rich tapestries, and everywhere the French were swaggering, drunk on victory. Finally, we reached a great chamber overlooking the Kremlin grounds. There was a cluster of generals round the table, and a stream of officers hurrying back and forth with reports and dispatches. Russia has icons everywhere, but here was the greatest icon I'd ever seen. And it wasn't Russian at all. Napoleon, in full uniform, a balloon of brandy in his hand, like the head of the hive as his workers and soldiers buzzed around him. Only he wasn't holding forth himself. He was listening while the doctor, still in his cloak, pronounced on how to handle the occupation, as if he knew it all. "And when you've summoned the governor of Moscow," he declared, "he must sign a formal surrender, huh? And make sure you get the keys of the city too. And when that's signed and sealed, you can demand the same from the Tsar. Surrender the rest of Russia over to France. Let's see them dare refuse that." Talk about currying favor. I nearly laughed out loud. But the generals all waited for Napoleon's reaction, and he looked distinctly weary. And then the doctor saw me, and for a moment, his eyes glittered. I don't think I'd ever seen him so scared. "Who is this?" said Napoleon, and the generals turned to stare. For a second, I thought I might have upset some grand scheme that the doctor had. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," I said and bowed. "I came to find the doctor. He's an old friend of mine." "That's enough of the old," snapped the doctor. "Take care, Your Majesty. This tiresome fellow plagues me wherever I go. He's a stray dog. You throw him one small bone, and he follows you for the rest of his life, huh?" The generals laughed. I was lost for a moment. I mean, how could the doctor say that? Napoleon frowned too. "Is that so bad, doctor? I'd reward any dog of mine that was so faithful." He turned to me. "Do you have a name, monsieur?" "Oh, he does indeed," interrupted the doctor. "His name is Stephen Taylor, and his country is England." Well, that was debatable, but it set the generals muttering. "I'm sure," observed the Emperor, "that there are as many honorable Englishmen as there are Russian." Some less honourable than others, snapped the doctor. Your Majesty, I don't understand, I said. If I could speak to the doctor alone... That's easy, Napoleon said, and he dismissed his generals, leaving only the guards and himself to overhear. Then he sat back in his large chair with his brandy, as if he expected to be entertained. Well, sir, declared the doctor, why are you following me? Explain yourself. Me, I exploded. Doctor, it was you who left me behind. I think you even hit me on the head in case I stopped you. And where's Dodo? Is she in on this? Who is Dodo? Said Napoleon. The doctor shrugged. I've no idea. No idea what he's babbling about. That went in like a knife. I've never felt so betrayed. And when I looked at the doctor, his hair was wrong. His stance was all wrong. His eyes, which had always been blue, were flickering green to purple to gold. He was the doctor, and yet he wasn't like the doctor at all. Doctor? You're ill, I said. What are you doing? He waved a dismissive hand. Your Majesty, this is a pretense. This man sympathizes with the Russians, huh? Of course I'm on the Russian side, I protested. The French have invaded their country, killed thousands, destroyed their way of life, and I think you're leading their emperor astray too. Monsieur, Napoleon said, the doctor conducted us here, right into Moscow. You'd be here anyway, I said. The doctor advised on our route and saved us from possible attack. Everything fell exactly as he said it would be. We owe him that debt. What did he say, I argued. Did he tell you you'd win? It's quite plain, the doctor added, fixing the emperor with a long stare, that Mr. Taylor has plans of his own. He's only here for one purpose. He's an assassin, ready to take your Majesty's life. Don't listen to him! I made a run at the doctor, but the guards caught and held me fast. Something's controlling you, doctor, I shouted. You've become as much a tyrant as he is. And I nodded at Napoleon, which was a mistake. How dare you, sir, the doctor exploded. One day soon, Napoleon, Emperor of France, will be Emperor of the world. Napoleon sighed. I don't blame you, monsieur. You're honest, at least, and deserve an honest punishment. He turned to his captain. Take him out and shoot him, with the rest of the protesters. Doctor! I yelled, but he didn't lift a finger. He just smiled. I was bundled down some back stairs into a yard where a group of soldiers were lounging. Execution squad, form up, shouted the captain, and the soldiers jumped into line. I was thrown against the wall opposite. I stumbled. I wasn't even allowed to stand up as they took aim. I saw the row of rifle barrels like eyes, all accusing... That can't be it. No, not yet. There's more to tell.
Don't you remember more?
I don't know.
There must be more. Surely there's something. Think!
I'd been alone before. A lone pilot on deep space missions, a prisoner on Mechanus, but there was always something to talk to. Flight control or a robot warder, but here it was all against me. All I saw was a row of accusing rifles, aimed, ready to spit their contempt.
And then?
A voice called across the yard. Stop it! Hold your fire on the orders of the Emperor.
It was the doctor.
And Dodo was with him. That confused the captain. Sir, the Emperor ordered... The Emperor changed his mind, snapped the doctor. Now lay down your arms. Dodo started helping me up. We thought we'd lost you. How did you get here? On my own, I complained. No thanks to you. I didn't come as a guest of royalty. That wasn't us, she said, and glanced at the doctor. He faced me full on, no longer in his cloak. Stephen, dear boy, I'm sorry for what's happened. You'd better have a good explanation, I said. He sighed. This is very awkward, but there's no other way to make you understand. Are you sure, said Dodo? Are you really ready for this? We must, he said. Captain, please escort us back to the Emperor. Why did you leave me, I asked, as we walked back up the stairs. I told you, whispered Dodo. We didn't. It was the thief. The thief, I said. What thief? The shape thief, said the doctor. The alien from the crash ship who murdered Semyon. And stole his shape, I said. He destroyed Glasher's life. Dodo grimaced. That was just the start, you'll see. We reached the chamber, And there stood Napoleon, looking out at the fiery sunrise over Moscow. And with him was the doctor, still in his long cloak. The captain and I stopped dead, but our doctor, the real doctor who just saved my life, was already marching across the room. "Good morning, Your Majesty," he said with a wry smile. "I am the doctor." Napoleon clutched at the table for support, staring from one doctor to the other. "You!" gasped the false doctor. "Your Majesty, stay away. This is a devil in human guise." "Oh, what nonsense," declared our doctor. "You may have learned those knots from a forester, sir, but nothing keeps me tied up for long. And now, your charade is at an end, hmm?" "It is him," I said. "He looked like Semyon, and now—"
I hate that word, thief.
But that's what you are. Infinitely adaptable. That's what the doctor called you. In any environment, you evolve into the ideal life form.
But then I'd hardly be you, would I, Stephen Taylor? But in the TARDIS, well, that was better than any primal world. In my sophisticated, technologically superior TARDIS, what else could I become but the Doctor?
There were the two of you. Two doctors, both shouting, "You're an imposter, sir!" circling the room like prize fighters, and by the second, each seemed more like the other. The guards just stood and stared until Napoleon took charge. "This man has been with me all the time," he said, meaning the false doctor. "He has my favor." But our doctor was having none of it. "What did he tell you, sir? Did he tell you that you'd win? Do you really believe it?" The Emperor swayed a little. "I've more than won Russia already. He told me." "No, Your Majesty," I yelled. "He's a liar and a killer. He's not even from your world. This is the real doctor." Napoleon gulped at his brandy. He studied one doctor and then the other, and he must have seen it. The way your eyes shifted color and glittered. And he knew at last.
I never got it right. The bloody scientists. The eyes were the one thing they could never fix.
You knew you were finished, but you still grabbed Napoleon.
The most powerful man in this world, and I had a knife at his throat.
And then the alarm started. People running, shouts of fire.
And I just panicked and ran.
They all panicked. Napoleon staggered to the window, and the clouds over Moscow were lit red with flames. "Get after him!" shouted the doctor. "Don't let him reach the TARDIS!" And we were down the stairs, out into the grounds before they could stop us. I caught up with you at the TARDIS door.
You nearly took my fingers off.
You'd have grown some more. I forced my way in with the doctor and Dodo right behind me, and you were already at the console working the flight controls.
It was my ship. I knew how to fly it. I'd seen the doctor's thoughts. I'm a fast reader.
But the TARDIS just shuddered. It wouldn't respond. One thing was missing.
As the doctor delighted in telling me.
The two doctors were nose to nose. "Ever seen a mirror argue with itself?" whispered Dodo. "My TARDIS won't work for you," our doctor said. "It doesn't recognize you." "Oh, you can study and copy me in detail, right down to my brain patterns and genetic codes. You can steal my hat and cloak and character. But it isn't me, is it, eh? It's just an impersonation, you see? Not the real thing at all. And my TARDIS isn't fooled. So, who are you really?"
The scientists made me.
The scientist you hate so much. And from behind a chair, you picked up the medical kit we'd salvaged from the escape pod. You clutched it to you like a child.
I'm a pinnacle of evolution, the ultimate infiltrating agent, designed to fit in anywhere. I can't help it. I always go for the top. That's how I'm programmed.
Programmed to kill.
When was the last time I was myself? Maybe there's no real me left at all. How many people have you ever been? Blame the scientists, sitting in laboratory cubicles, coldly analyzing my genetic performance, ticking off my metamorphic prowess. So I destroyed their ship and ran away.
Why didn't you kill the doctor? The doctor and Dodo?
I'm a spy, not a murderer. Leaving a trail of bodies is not best practice.
You killed Semyon?
I'm sorry. It was an accident. I was a bear. I didn't know my own strength. I killed my persecutors too, the scientists who made me what I am.
I wouldn't offer you help, but the doctor did. He offered you a new life away from Earth if you'd come, but you turned him down.
I'd had enough of running, but I can't escape my nature. If I couldn't be the doctor in his TARDIS...
The doctor's a scientist too.
Then I'd find another way here on Earth, and I already knew how.
You shifted. Your whole shape changed. Your body filled out. You became younger. Your white hair went dark and slid back into your head. Right in front of us, you evolved into Napoleon, Emperor of France, standing in the doctor's clothes, clutching the alien medical kit. No, you can't do that, laughed the doctor. Fell right into my trap, didn't you? You can't be Napoleon. He loses. You swayed with anger.
The doctor lied to me. I believed him when I read his mind. Napoleon wins, he said. The doctor deliberately lied.
It's all about survival, isn't it?
I may not have Russia, I said, but I can still have the rest of Napoleon's empire.
And you ran out of the TARDIS up into the palace, desperate to find the Emperor.
Where was he? Where was Napoleon?
He was gone. And from the window you saw Moscow burning. The holy city was a ring of flames. The people had done it to themselves. The Muscovites were burning their own homes. Napoleon had nowhere to go. So he went. He'd lost.
No.
Savage determination, said the doctor. What a people. Huh?
Where was Napoleon?
The French were already leaving. We followed you as you ran out of the Kremlin, out onto the streets. The smoke was choking us. We tried to stop you, but you were past listening.
Napoleon!
There were crowds out by now. They were running wild, determined to see off the fleeing invaders. And before we could stop you, you ran smack into a whole gang of them. Look, it's him, they shouted. It's old Boney himself. He's got left behind. And they lifted you high above their heads, out of our reach. Put him down, we yelled. But they didn't care. They were spinning you like a top, moving away from us. And as the smoke billowed in and the heat became scorching, I saw your face upside down and caught your eye glittering with fire. And the moment seemed to freeze and stretch away from me.
My name is Stephen Taylor.
Oh, no, you don't. That's my name, not yours.
But it could be mine.
The story turned in my head again, like my whole life flashing before me. Who was real? Semyon? The doctor? Napoleon? Or the bear?
Don't forget Dodo.
Was that you as well? I don't know anymore. I don't belong here. You said so. I don't fit. Unless you're me too. Are you Stephen Taylor, being carried away by the mob?
No. It's me, master of deceit, the man with no face of my own. You'll find somewhere, Monsieur Stephen. Sooner or later, you'll fit in. But don't take this away from me. Not my final performance! Ah!
The smoke curtained out the street and the crowd. There was nothing we could do. We hurried back to the Kremlin and watched the city burn from the great bell tower. The last of the French were leaving, carts trundling as the jubilant crowd saw them off. "Is that it?" said Dodo. "Are they going home?" "Of course, child," complained the doctor. "Haven't you read any history?" I shivered. "I have now. They won't get far, poor devils. Winter's coming. Russian winter." And, like a sign, down through the smoke drifted the first flakes of Russian snow.
coming soon from Big Finish.
I am James Robert MacCrimmon. I am the son of a piper. I am a Highlander. I know all of this to be true. I understand all of this. I remember you bandaging my head when they first brought me here. How many days ago was that? I was out on the moors, walking alone on a bright, clear day, and then, all of a sudden, they say I was struck by lightning. I remember none of this. The men who found me say the heather around me was dotted with flame, and I lay with my head burning and smoking, so they thought I was dead. The lightning has cleared my memory. It's helped me to remember something. I want to tell you about the Doctor and about traveling in the TARDIS. I want to tell you about Mindivoire and about Helicon Prime.
It was a big surprise. When Big Finish asked me to do this, I said yes. I knew who you were. I knew what Big Finish was. But I'd never been asked to take part in any of the other reconstructions and things that they'd done. And so it came right out of the blue. But why not? It was a thing based on the companions, and it's a whole series of these. And as I was one of the companions, yes, I wasn't going to be left out of it if I was offered. And then the script arrived. So happily surprised. It is a really strong, dramatic script. It's something you can get your teeth into and you really can play it. So I've had great fun recording it. But doing something like this, you just grab at it. I read it through twice. We then come to record it, and then it suddenly comes to life. Now, I've got accents in there which vary from Welsh Russian to sort of Greek French. It's a mishmash. I can't guarantee that they're accurate, but it's an attempt. And I made that attempt in the available time we had to do it, in the hope that it adds some colour to the thing. And I think it just about works. I don't pretend they're authentic accents.
How is it working on a character you played about 40 years ago?
Scary, isn't it? Yeah, it's 42 years ago I started playing Steve. It's great. Mark's done a terrific job with the script. It feels like I'm playing the same character. I can feel that the character is the same character. And that's a real pleasure. So it's been a joy.
Your Hartnell impersonation was absolutely spot on.
Oh, it varies. I knew Bill quite well. I mean, we got on very well together. He took me under his wing a bit. I mean, he used to feed me once a week. You know, we'd go over to Bertorelli's on Shepherd's Bush Green. He would make sure I had a decent lunch, and he would pay. I mean, he was most generous to me. My wife and I used to return the compliment and take him out occasionally for an Indian meal, which he liked. He was very good company for me. And he gave me a few hints and a few tips that were valuable, no question about that. But I always found him very friendly and very straightforward. There was no side with him with me. I watched it with others. Didn't suffer fools gladly. Very few directors he liked. A number of the actors who came in he didn't take to. And if he didn't, then he would give them a bad time. He could be a pretty irascible bloke. But speak as you found. And my immediate contact, working with him experience, was very pleasurable.
Was he ill at the time, or just getting on a bit?
I think he was getting ill. And certainly by the time I left, he was getting seriously ill. He was unable to remember his lines well. And that made him cross. So I think some of his quirkiness and his irascibility was because he was annoyed with himself. He wasn't doing it as well as he knew he could. He was a good actor, was Bill. You know, he created a wonderful character with the Doctor. And for me, still the definitive Doctor. There's no one come up to it. I'm not saying that others who played the Doctor have not been good actors. They have, and there've been some splendid performances. They weren't the Doctor.
The thing that impressed me when I read this Mother Russia is that it wasn't too sci-fi. It was more interested in the historical background.
And the historical stories were the ones I liked best. I mean, we did the Massacre, which was a wonderful story written by John Lucarotti. We did the Myth Makers, which was based on the Siege of Troy. These were wonderful historical, or mythical, in the case of that, stories. We did the invasion of the Vikings coming into northern England, the very first one I did, but that was sci-fi as well, because that was the time meddler. But the historical ones I liked. I didn't really like the mechanical ones. I wasn't fussed about the gadgets, and I wasn't fussed about the Daleks and the mechanoids and so on. They didn't interest me a great deal.
That's heresy to say you're not fussed by the Daleks.
It is heresy, and I'm a heretic.
Talking earlier, you talked about having been trained in rep, which was just the best training that an actor can get.
I think it probably was. I mean, I know I didn't go to drama school, but I did. I was lucky enough to be asked to join a repertory company in the north of England, at Barrow-in-Furness.
And it stood you in good stead, I would imagine, for Doctor Who, which was pretty much around the year, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. We had. I can't remember how many weeks off we had. Maybe 10. But it was a weekly thing. I did 44 episodes, so yeah, that's 8 weeks off in the year.
Bit like a weekly rep in itself.
In itself, it was, but only half hour long. You know.
Yeah.
Plays could be as long as 2 hours, you know.
Yeah,
and you really could struggle. It depended on how big the part was, but no, I mean, it was comparatively easy in that respect. But it was a new medium for me. I'd done a few television plays, and I'd done played bit parts in all the series that people got involved with back in the 60s. You know, Z-Cars, Red Cap, Court Martial, Gideon's Way, The Saints. You were in all. You played in all those. You know, the odd episode here and there. Z-Cars was the big one. I even did an episode of World of Wooster back there with Ian Carmichael. That was about 1964, something frightening like that.
I would have thought the line learning stood you in good stead for Blue Peter as well.
Certainly, well, it had to, because Blue Peter we did without auto-cue, twice a week, half an hour live, 5:10, fully rehearsed, vision mixer, cutting on words. It was scary stuff. We had to be very precise. I haven't done any proper acting in years. I mean, I really haven't. I'd love to.
I was going to say, have you been tempted?
No, I'm tempted and no one offers. I mean, it's just one of those things. If someone offered me a part, I'd take it. But no, I mean, it just doesn't happen. I'm known as myself. And I mean, I've had a very nice and successful career just presenting different shows. And I'm proud to have done all that. I presented all the BBC's darts coverage for about 7 years. And the odd little bits. We did a show called Driver of the Year for 3 years. Really interesting series. And I've just carried on presenting. It's never really varied. But the acting work just hasn't really been there. But of course, going away and doing a short tour of something tends not to be quite as lucrative as doing it with the telly, you know. So one tends to do the tellies. And no, but as I say, if I was offered some acting, I would seriously consider it.
Well, on the strength of today, I'd be surprised if you weren't.
Well, that's very complimentary of you. It's a lovely script.
nurse. It's Nurse Muir, isn't it? I remember you bandaging my head when they first brought me here. How many days ago was that? I was out in the moors, walking alone on a bright, clear day, and all of a sudden, they say I was struck by lightning. I remember none of this. The men who found me say the heather around me was dotted with flame, and I lay with my head burning and smoking, so they thought I must be dead. Please, don't go just yet. The lightning has cleared my memory. It's helped me to remember something. I want to tell you about the doctor and about travelling in the TARDIS. I want to tell you about Mindy Voya and about Helicon Prime. The doctor didn't seem to notice that the TARDIS had landed. He'd been tinkering with the controls and got carried away and finally tinked some bit of equipment apart, scattering the pieces across the floor. It didn't look quite the same once he put it back together, and I saw him kick some cogs and wires away when he thought I wasn't looking. I told him that we'd arrived somewhere, and he forgot all about his repairs, rushing around the controls, eager to investigate where we were. The picture on the TARDIS scanner was crowded with great big leaves and ferns. Jamie, the doctor announced, we seem to have landed in a forest. Splendid! While Victoria's away at her graphology studies, I think we can enjoy a little nature ramble and plenty of fresh air. When he opened the doors, we heard music and the murmur of conversation. The doctor frowned. We stepped out of the TARDIS and the doctor scooped apart the big leaves of the large potted plants in front of us. We've landed in a corner of a restaurant, the doctor corrected. I don't think we're on Earth. At a nearby table, a woman with green skin and reptile eyes looked up from lapping at a bowl of some bright purple liquid and stared at us. You think so, Doctor? I said. The band on the stage at the other end of the room were strange, spindly beasties in smart jackets, and the guests were as alien as the woman nearest to us. Servants, who looked human at least, roamed the restaurant, waiting on the tables. It all looks very high class, doesn't it? Said the doctor happily. Just follow my lead, Jamie, so we blend in. He told me before he fought his way through the potted plants. I moved round the side and waited as the doctor smoothed his hair and brushed at his clothes. The lizard woman watched him, warily, her forked tongue flicking from her mouth, tasting our presence. Doctor, I said quietly, I think we've been noticed. I nodded towards a couple of the waiters who had spotted our arrival and were heading in our direction. We made for large double doors and only managed to avoid the most determined waiter when a large furry guest caught his attention. He stopped, immediately ignoring us, and smiled politely. Outside the restaurant was a grand staircase leading down into a hallway with a fountain in the center. The place was busy with people and many other folk. A group of cat-like creatures walking upright came towards us, all following a leader who held a flag above his head. He nodded to the doctor as he passed. So where are we? I asked. I don't know yet, said the doctor, although we're a long way from your side of the universe. Look at the fountain. I stared at it for a moment, puzzled by what the doctor meant, then realized what he was talking about. Hey, it's flowing upwards, I said. That there must be some kind of a trick. That's not possible. I'm sure someone from here would think the same if they saw a Highland spring, Jamie, replied the doctor in his know-all tone. Now then, we must be somewhere with sympathetic gravity, he began muttering to himself as he walked downstairs. I waited as a shoal of brightly coloured fish floated past, and then I followed the doctor. Around the fountain were several people in uniforms who were handing out things to the passing guests. Both the doctor and I were given small discs. Aha, Jamie, the doctor nodded as he examined the disc. We're on Helicon Prime. I looked at my disc, smooth, shiny, and completely blank. It must have matched my expression because the doctor grinned. It's a sort of passkey, he explained. They're quite sought after. Helicon Prime is a luxury resort where people come to be pampered. Utmost indulgence, sumptuous surroundings and all that. The doctor looked very pleased with himself. This is one of the most exclusive holiday destinations in the universe. They're always booked up decades in advance. The doctor waved his disc in the air. I think I've done rather well this time, he said, beaming. Sounds fine, I agreed. Until they find out we're snuck here in the TARDIS. Quiet, Jamie, the doctor hissed. We don't need to mention that to anybody. Besides, I doubt we'll be asked. It's all very refined here. An imposing figure in flowing robes swept down the stairs and into one of the corridors leading from the hall. You see, said the doctor, apparently proving a point. That's a galactic ambassador. Very important. Several other figures appeared in the hall and headed for the corridor the ambassador had just taken. Doctor, I said, look, everyone's in a bit of a hurry, aren't they? The shoal of brightly coloured fish darted among guests and disappeared along the same corridor, followed by some of the waiters, who were striding as fast as possible without actually running. Curious, murmured the doctor. Let's see what's going on, I said. We hurried after the others and soon found a crowd of people gathered around the doors of a drawing room. The ambassador was talking to a uniformed man who was blocking the doorway. The fish flickered around the ambassador's shoulders, trying to peer inside. What do you think it is, Doctor? I whispered. There was no reply, and I turned to look for him. Doctor, I called. One of the staff heard me. Is there a doctor here, did you say? The doctor suddenly appeared at the front of the crowd. Yes, I'm the doctor, he announced, squeezing past the ambassador and waving away the inquisitive fish. Excuse me, now then, let me see, what can I do? Hey, doctor, what's going on? I called out as he disappeared into the room.
There's been an incident.
I turned and saw a young lassie in a short metallic dress with silvery hair piled upon her head. She had given up craning to see over the shoulder of another guest and was looking at me. What do you mean, an incident? I said.
Someone's been found dead.
Dead? How?
I don't know. Nothing bad is supposed to happen on Helicon Prime, but I heard one of the staff say so. Perhaps that little man they've let inside will be able to find out. Did they say he was a doctor?
Aye, that's the doctor. He'll soon find out if anything fishy is going on. As I said that, the whole shoal twitched, turned, and looked at me. No, I didn't mean anything, I said, but it was too late. They flared with colour and swam off, affronted.
Don't worry, they won't remember you.
I hope they don't. I'm Jamie McCrimmon, by the way.
Mindy Dwyer. Nice to meet you, Jamie. I wonder what's happening. Can you see any more?
There's a doctor now, talking with the staff on that fellow in the robes, the ambassador. Doctor, what's going on? The doctor came over to me, shaking his head. It's one of the guests, Jamie, he said grimly. He's died. I'm not quite sure what caused it. Ambassador Dromio is making the arrangements. Oh, great, and we've only just arrived, I noted. But Mindy was saying that nothing bad. I didn't manage to get any further because the doctor caught sight of her and immediately brightened. Mindy, he said, sounding surprised. Mindy Thrapple-Olive-Wire? It is, isn't it? The doctor chuckled to himself. Why, it's wonderful to meet you, he announced, taking Mindy's hand and shaking it enthusiastically.
Hello, Doctor. Please call me Mindy Dwyer. I'm on holiday here.
I looked at them both, Mindy smiling politely, the doctor beaming eagerly. Do you two know each other then? I said. The doctor finally released Mindy's hand. Jamie, this is Mindy Dwyer, he said, forgetting I'd just introduced him. The singer, and if I may say, one of my favourite singers. He turned to grin at her again. I often play your recordings, my dear, he told her. Do you? I said. The doctor shot me a look. Quite often, he said defensively. Probably when you're not around. Mindy has an absolute exquisite voice, best appreciated by the trained ear. The only human with a 10-octave range, Jamie, he concluded.
How kind of you to say so, Doctor. I was trained by my father, Mietor, of course.
And have you got all his recordings too? I asked the doctor.
No, my father didn't sing. Not professionally, at least. He was a pioneer of sonic sculpting before he gave it all up to become an explorer. He developed special training techniques for me when I was young, Ways to expand my voice to its greatest potential. I owe everything to him, really.
The doctor rummaged in his pockets looking for something. I never got to meet him, I'm afraid, but I did read his paper on the principles of sonic sculpting with plagal cadences. Most sophisticated. A very remarkable man, I thought. The doctor trailed off, still searching in his coat. I recognised the doctor's tone of voice. It was the one he used when he was talking on a subject that had grabbed his attention, the one that could go on for a very long time. It's been very nice to meet you, miss, I said. Come along, doctor, maybe we should be going. Let's leave Mindy to enjoy the rest of her holiday in peace, shall we? The doctor ignored me and offered a small piece of frayed old string to Mindy. Perhaps, he said hopefully, I could trouble you for a sonic signature. He looked sheepish.
I couldn't, Doctor, not here. Maybe some other time.
Doctor, I said, let's go. What are you talking about anyway? Sonic signature? You've only got a piece of dirty old string there. The doctor returned the string to a pocket and then changed his mind and put it in another one. Mindy Wire can tie knots in string using sonics alone, the doctor said huffily. It's well known and very impressive. I looked at him for a moment. Aye, all right, you're having me on, aren't you? Well, I'm not daft enough to fall for that. I folded my arms and waited for the doctor to break into a grin.
It's quite true, Jamie. My father developed the technique. It's all about controlling the sound vibrations.
I looked at her warily. Really? You're not joking?
Absolutely not. Here, this pendant I'm wearing is one of his. See for yourself.
Mindy took the pendant from around her neck and handed it to me. It was a tightly bound knot set in a gold chain. As I held it, there was the softest ghost of a tune. I lifted it closer to my ear and I realised that the music really was coming from the knot, whispering faintly through the strands. I was so surprised I handed it back to Mindy, speechless. The doctor looked smug. You see, just like I said, he sniffed. You should have listened to me, he finished. The doctor decided that we should stay on Helicon Prime for a while. I thought this was so he could investigate the death, but his plan mainly involved us pretending to be relaxing guests and him waving to Mindy whenever he spotted her. So are we keeping an eye on a suspect? I said as we sat on the beach of a make-believe lagoon. That's right, Jamie, muttered the doctor as he turned the page of his book. He'd already managed to read 4 since we'd arrived. He'd also taught me a game called table tennis, which we stopped playing after I got the knack of it, and insisted we try all the machines in something called an amusement arcade, where I won a yo-yo. So who do you suspect, Doctor? I prompted. The doctor looked up from his book. I'm still not sure yet. It is, I agree, an unexpected death, but that in itself doesn't mean anything untoward has gone on. Having said this, he buried his head back in his book, and everything was quiet apart from the waves lapping at the bright red shore. I sat up, intending to lean over to the doctor, but I accidentally knocked over a bowl of dates. Immediately, little whirlpools appeared in the sand, spiraling away the scattered fruit in tiny swallows. Like everything else on Helicon Prime, even the beach was designed to be as convenient and comfortable as possible. So we're just sitting around doing nothing, being mollycoddled, I said, annoyed at him. Come on, Doctor, shouldn't we be off somewhere battling Daleks or chasing Yeti? But this is pointless. The doctor rested his book on his chest. Oh, I wouldn't say that, Jamie. Our being here is as good as our being anywhere else for the present. If it were pointless, why would the ambassador's secretary be so interested in us? The ambassador? I said, confused. What do you mean? Hey, is he having us watched? Exactly, Jamie, the doctor answered. Ambassador Dromio's secretary has been following us around almost everywhere, no doubt reporting back on what we've done and any snippets he's overheard. Look over there, the other side of the lagoon, beside the palm trees. I looked in the direction and saw a figure duck behind a bench, but it was enough to recognize the shiny uniform. What do you think he wants? I said. Spying lessons, if you ask me, replied the doctor. He's been very indiscreet in tailing the two of us. The doctor picked up his book again. I'm surprised you hadn't noticed him, he added, licking the tip of his finger and turning the page. Well, now that you mentioned it, I suppose I had, I said airily. Just hadn't thought to say anything. The figure moved again, further hidden by the palm trees. So do you think there's something going on, I said? The doctor closed his book. From what I heard Ambassador Dromio talking about, the guest who died, Galax, was a mining speculator, the doctor said, solemnly. There's plenty of money involved in that, Jamie, trading in the mineral wealth of entire planets, and the prospect of money invariably brings out the worst in people. Ah, I replied. So you do have a plan? The doctor shuffled. Well, I wouldn't quite go that far, he said vaguely. Working on one might be the better way of putting it. He peered over the side of his hammock. Jamie, really, he gasped. Have you finished all those dates? I decided to go for a walk. Beyond the beach was a corridor leading to another hall. The hall of Helicon Prime was shaped like this, a sort of honeycomb, so that wherever you were, it was easy to find your way out. I thought it was so that no one had to put much effort into getting about. In the hall area, sitting on the edge of a fountain, was a short, squat creature, its great mouth filled with dangerous-looking teeth. He was wearing knee breeches, a tie like the doctor's, and was checking a watch tucked into the pocket of his waistcoat. Despite the sights I had seen travelling in the TARDIS, I couldn't help staring. Delighted to meet you, the strange-looking beastie said. I'm the Gorgle Chine. I introduced myself, watching him kick his heels against the side of the fountain. You've not passed a charming young lady with long golden hair on your way here by any chance, have you? Gorgle asked. No, I haven't, I answered. I've been down by the lagoon there, I added, pointing to the corridor I'd just come from. I'm supposed to be meeting her here, you see, Gorgle said. We're going for dinner, he added, looking pleased with himself. Aye, is that why you're dressed up all smart then, is it? I replied. Gorgle immediately looked worried, his teeth seeming to shiver. You don't think I've overdone it, do you? He asked. No, not at all, I told him. I think you look just fine. Gorgle, reassured, began tweaking his tie, and a beautiful young lassie with streaming golden hair appeared from one of the corridors. Gorgle grinned at her, played his fingers in the upwards streaming fountain, and smoothed his hair. She moved over to his side and took his hand as he hopped to the floor. Good evening, he said, bowing first to her and then to me before they walked away. Gorgle only just came up to her hip, but trotted alongside her happily. I couldn't help grinning as they left. A charming couple, said a cool voice. I turned round to see a figure composed of glass. I thought so, I said, uncertain about the man's tone. Theirs won't be the first holiday romance to blossom on Helicon Prime, the stranger said. Nor the last. He folded his arms, the facets grating against each other. With this much peace and quiet, folks have a chance to notice each other, I answered. The man cocked his head to the side, viewing me with one steady eye. Quite so. Helicon Prime used to be a retirement destination in the Parnassus cluster. Amid the languor and inertia, many older couples did, as you say, take notice of each other. They discovered how little they had in common and how much they had in fact disliked each other. An undercurrent of violence developed. That's why Helicon Prime was moved here, to the soothing grace effects of the golden section. But the undercurrent is still there, I argued. I'd been travelling with the doctor long enough to be aware of threats, even of being threatened directly. I shifted my stance, ready for sudden action. Good, the glass man said. The strongest undercurrents exist beneath the calmest surfaces. His eyes caught the light and winked. You're an acquaintance of the doctor, the one who confirmed Galax's death, are you not? That's right, I replied. Jamie McCrimmon. I wasn't sure whether he expected to shake hands, and he made no move to unfold his arms. My name is Romeo. Your friend may have unwittingly disturbed the waters, shall we say. Ambassador Dromio has taken an interest in you both. It is not good to be the subject of the ambassador's interest. You should be very careful, Jamie. Both of you. When I returned to the doctor, I found him lying in his hammock playing his recorder. He seemed more concerned that we'd be late for an evening meal than hearing what Romeo said to me. But doctor, I tried once again when we were at the restaurant. He seemed to think we might be in some kind of danger. Responded the doctor, pushing a menu in front of me and poring over one himself. Now don't order anything without checking, Jamie. Some of this could do terrible things to the human system. Romeo warned me about the ambassador, I repeated. But the doctor wasn't listening. Oh, look, there's Mindy, he said. Good evening, my dear, he called out as she passed.
Hello, Doctor.
I prodded the doctor's elbow. Listen, will you? What if the ambassador finds out we've only just arrived before Galax died? How would that look? Romeo didn't make him out to be a very nice piece of work. Jamie, sighed the doctor, you're fussing. Whatever the ambassador is up to, we're quite safe here, aren't we? Now, are you ready to order? I shook my head. I don't like it, I tell you. Over by the bandstand, I noticed a familiar figure sitting with a companion, eating what looked like blobs of light. There is Romeo, I said. The glass man. Maybe we should talk to him. Crystalline, Jamie, not glass. Petriforms get quite touchy about that. The doctor frowned. I say, he doesn't look all that well. As we watched, Romeo began twitching. He rose awkwardly and staggered to the side, colliding with a neighbouring table. Cracks started to appear across his surface, accompanied by a sound like splitting ice. As he tried to fumble at the edge of the bandstand for support, and his companion shrieked for help, Romeo exploded. Are you all right, Doctor? I said, rising from under the table. My ears were still popping, and I didn't want to think about the dusty feeling tickling my nose. Oh, I think so, Jamie, answered the doctor. But goodness me, how terrible, he added, clambering from the other side. A fine powder glistened over the back of his coat and in his hair. Poor Romeo, he said, looking across the restaurant. All that was left of Romeo drifted in the air, catching the lights like a shimmering mist. Several waiters were attending to Romeo's distressed companion while others helped the stunned diners from nearby tables. The band had retreated behind their music stands or taken shelter beyond the curtains. Careful, everybody, said the doctor as he approached the scene. Get back, please, all of you. The waiters immediately began ushering the guests out of the way and towards the door. Jamie, the doctor called back to me, could you pass me that dish? I picked up the dish he'd indicated and drew level with Romeo's table. A few of the blobs of light still lay upon a plate, quivering slightly. Thank you, Jamie, muttered the doctor, taking the dish and clamping it over the glowing shapes. Briefly, the light seemed to shine through the dish and soak the tablecloth in a ring before it faded. What was that? I said. The doctor fumbled in his pockets. Volatile light, he replied. He took out his sonic screwdriver and drew it back and forth over the top of the upturned dish. There, he sighed. Back within a safe wavelength. Dear me. He replaced his sonic screwdriver, took a handkerchief from his top pocket, and began brushing at his shoulders. So Romeo was poisoned, I said. In a manner of speaking, Jamie, yes, I suppose he was, the doctor replied. One of the waiters came towards us. The guests are all clear, sir, he said. Are you both unhurt? Yes, thank you, quite all right, considering, said the doctor, returning his handkerchief to his pocket. Tell me, has the ambassador been told of this? The waiter nodded. Ambassador Dromio requested he be kept informed of any further incidents, sir, he answered. I looked from the waiter to the doctor. Aye, I'm not surprised, I said. The doctor paid me no attention. Where is the ambassador now, he asked, in case I wanted to see him. Ambassador Dromio's suite is a closed one, sir, replied the waiter. He bit his lip. I think it was something he wasn't meant to talk about. He has the whole of the Melpomene level reserved. Has he indeed, muttered the doctor, rubbing his chin. Very interesting. The doctor bent forward and cautiously lifted the dish. There were now only a few greyish, crumbling lumps remaining, although the tablecloth held a glare almost too brilliant to look at. That's quite harmless now, the doctor said, but that stain is there for good, I'm afraid. Come along, Jamie. The doctor strode off quite suddenly. I had to hurry up after him. Hey, doctor, wait! We're not going right up to confront Ambassador Dromio, are we? No, Jamie, we're not, replied the doctor. I don't fancy meeting the ambassador in his own private parlour. I'm rather more interested in finding out exactly what happened to Galax. We're in the golden section, you see. I shook my head. No, I don't see. What is this golden section people keep mentioning? It's a sort of peaceful, harmonious area, an oasis of calm, contentment and good feeling unique to this galaxy, explained the doctor. Somewhere it should be almost impossible to feel anger or aggression, let alone perpetrate violence. Some people find it hard enough to beat others in a game of cards under such conditions. But Romeo was killed, Doctor, I said. What does that mean? Could this effect not work on somebody? The doctor scratched at his head. I can only recall a few life forms that are completely immune to the influence of the golden section. It's most puzzling. Do you think Ambassador Dromio is employing some alien that isn't affected, I suggested? Maybe that's the answer. Possibly, Jamie. In fact, a shrewd theory, but unlikely, stated the doctor. Now then, I'm going to have another look at poor Galax and make sure that Ambassador Dromio learns of it. But Doctor, I replied, if he thinks you suspect something, he'll try to stop you, and we don't know what he's capable of. Precisely, Jamie, the doctor said keenly. I dare say he and that little secretary of his will be racing to the medical centre the moment they hear, but they can't very well do anything so publicly. That should give you enough time to have a jolly good look round his private suite, eh? Now then, let's have a look and see how secure the melpomene level really is. Not for the first time, I found myself creeping cautiously into an unknown situation at the doctor's suggestion. Nip down that dark, dank tunnel, Jamie, and see if there's a terrible beastie at the bottom of it, or Jamie, please press these buttons when I say so I can save the world again. And yes, I would. I wonder what I was getting myself into this time. Would I be fighting for my life with some deadly robots, or looking for the secret compartment of a desk? Of course, that was the point. It was the excitement, the chance to live on my wits, and the trust as well. When I saw the light flicker that meant the other lift was in use, that the ambassador was on his way, I pressed the buttons in the lift and watched sparks and flashes through the wires tumbling from the control panel. It hadn't taken the doctor long to do something with it, helped by his sonic screwdriver. He'd happily reknitted the insides, muttering to himself, not bothered by the crackles or wisp of smoke. There, he announced at last, that has overridden the security locks. You sneak up and see what you can find. So, what is this I'm looking for, I asked, and then another thought struck me. Hey, Doctor, could he have more of these lights, like the one that killed Romeo? Oh no, replied the doctor. I shouldn't think so. That's not the sort of thing one leaves lying around. He brushed a sooty smudge from the back of his fingers. See what turns up, anything unusual. I almost answered this, but managed to bite my tongue. Unusual? What wasn't? The lift doors opened on Ambassador Dromio's level, and I stepped out into another large hall, although this one was deserted and silent, except for the trickles and splashes from the fountain in the centre. Unsure how much time I had, I immediately set off along the nearest corridor, finding several empty bedrooms and a narrow door at the end that was locked. As I retreated from this dead end, I heard the quiet hum of the lift. The ambassador must be returning. Perhaps he had simply used his status and authority to block the doctor from examining Galax. Worse, he might even have seen through the doctor's plan. I raced into the hall and ducked behind the fountain, hoping that, if I was lucky, I would be able to avoid being seen and escape. The lift chimed softly, and the doors slowly opened. But it wasn't the ambassador who appeared. It wasn't even his secretary.
Jamie? Are you there?
Mindy, what are you doing?
I followed you, of course. And what are you doing, for that matter? Are you searching the ambassador's rooms? What is it you're hoping to find?
Well, the doctor and I think this ambassador might be something to do with Galax and Romeo dying. I stopped suddenly. Listen, Mindy, you should get away from here, I said. It could be dangerous. If the ambassador comes back and finds us up here...
If you're looking through the ambassador's rooms, you might want some help. He's had the whole of this level cordoned off for his personal use. I've been here before. The ambassador held an exclusive reception party when he arrived here, so I know my way around. Follow me, Jamie.
Before I could say anything, Mindy skipped past me and trotted down a corridor to her left. I sighed and hurried after her. We reached a large set of doors which Mindy casually pushed open to let us inside. The first thing I noticed was a golden tinge in the air. It played across everything, shining over one side of Mindy's face and making her silver hair wink and sparkle as she turned to look at me.
The golden section, Jamie. There it is.
On the other side of the room was a huge window running the length of the wall. Outside was the blackness of space, studded with twinkling stars. Only it wasn't simply black, the way I'd seen it before on the TARDIS scanner or wherever. There was a sheen of gold that seemed to hover across it. Not something you could see looking at it directly, more something you were aware of out of the corner of your eye. It reminded me of a mist rolling across a glen back home, but the effect was unlike anything I'd ever really experienced before. Within a few moments, a soothing, calming feeling filled me, draining away all the excitement of sneaking around looking through the ambassador's rooms.
Jamie, Jamie, look at me. That's it. The golden section can be quite dazzling the first time you're exposed to it directly, all that spangly serenity. It can take your breath away. Now, what is it you're looking for? What are you trying to find?
I shook my head and pressed my eyes while Mindy spoke to me, trying to clear the charm of the golden view from the window. Returning to myself, I glanced round the room, which had a huge table surrounded with high-backed chairs at one end and, surprisingly, an oak-panelled drawing room at the other, complete with leather chairs grouped around a large unlit fireplace and walls lined with bookshelves. There was even the mounted head of an animal positioned above the mantelpiece, the glow from the window opposite glinting of its numerous eyes. "Well, I'm not exactly looking for anything in particular," I admitted. "Anything unusual," the doctor said. I wondered if the ambassador was keeping something in his rooms that could be unaffected by this golden section, but here it seemed stronger than ever. As I spoke, Mindy began searching the room, looking in the cabinet at the far end and twitching back the curtain of an alcove and tapping various points of the wall behind the table.
There's another space behind this wall, not very large from the sound of it. Maybe it's to listen in on talks the ambassador claimed a secret. Eavesdropping and recording them, perhaps. Think of it, Jamie. With the full effects of the golden section streaming through the window, the ambassador is sitting here in conference with some of the most influential and powerful people in the galaxy. And he has the results on record.
Aye, that could be it. So he is up to something after all. The doctor reckoned it could... I stopped speaking instantly in response to Mindy's expression. Her face suddenly clouded with concern. "Hey, what is it? What's the matter?" I said. Mindy waved a hand anxiously across her mouth, urging me to be quiet. I moved nearer to the table, unable to work out what had suddenly alarmed her. "Mindy, what?" I hissed. Again, Mindy waved her arm at me, her eyes widening.
Jamie, someone's coming this way.
Much later than Mindy, I heard it too. It was the deep, unmistakable voice of the ambassador, growing rapidly clearer, talking loudly and confidently as he approached his private quarters. We were trapped. "Quickly, Mindy," I hissed. "Here, we can hide." As the ambassador and his guests approached, we ducked into an alcove, and I held the curtain still in case anyone spotted its movement and decided to investigate. The alcove was a narrow space with a control panel at the back, covered with dials and switches as mysterious as those of the TARDIS, and a screen set at eye level, presumably a communication device. I just hoped the ambassador wouldn't need to use it before we could get clear. Peering round the edge of the curtain, I saw Ambassador Dromio, his secretary, and two other guests. One wore a shiny space uniform similar to Romeo, while the other, dressed all in black, was human, apart from feathers covering the top of his head and the backs of his hands. "Gentlemen," said the ambassador, "perhaps you'll take a seat at the conference table, or would you prefer more comfortable surroundings?" The birdman cocked his head to one side. "Maybe enjoy a relaxed conversation in a more historical environment," he said. The ambassador nodded his head and gestured towards the seats in the drawing room. "Very well, Ratham," he said. "Weimar," he announced to his secretary, "please prepare the fire and bring us drinks." Weimar bowed and walked to one of the bookshelves, which slid back to let him through. In a moment, the fireplace ignited, a warm, cosy glow washing across the drawing room scene in a tiny echo of the golden light from outside. "This doctor," said the other guest, "is he a threat to us?" Ambassador Dromio took a goblet from the tray offered to him by his secretary and said casually, "Not anymore, Erlon. Be assured, I've seen to that." I started, and Mindy clutched at my sleeve. She pressed a finger to her mouth and shook her head. I have placed a discretionary seal on Galax's body to stop him interfering, the ambassador continued. The figure in the spacesuit, Erlon, rose from his seat to stand by the fire, sipping from a tall, thin glass and staring at the mounted head. You hunted a Nessus? I'm impressed, Ambassador, he said. A rare trophy. A gift, smiled the ambassador. I have a keen eye, not a death wish. Rathan and Weimar both laughed. So we three constitute the last of the Fenris Tontine, Erlon said. Rathan turned in his chair to fix Erlon with a sideways stare. Erlon, perhaps you too require a discretionary seal served upon your person, he hissed angrily. The ambassador held up a hand. Gentlemen, please. We're quite safe to discuss freely here. And the Marshal Laureate is correct. We are the last members of the Fenris rescue mission. The colony's treasure is ours. Erlon paced before the fire. Ours to search for, he said bitterly. What if it was in Romeo's possession? You will have to impose a reclamation order on his property. Ambassador, in case... Erlon trailed off. He swayed and cast an arm towards the mantelpiece, trying to steady himself. He tried to speak, but only uttered a guttering sound that reduced to a horrible, frothing cough. The glass smashed against the hearth and Erlon fell to the floor. Rathan bolted from his seat. Dromio, he shouted, before he too began spluttering. He slumped back into his chair, twisting and making strange chirping sounds that grew fainter and then stopped. I felt Mindy's hand grasp my arm. She looked at me open-mouthed with disgust. Weimar, called the ambassador, placing his drink down on a side table. Please inform my office that I shall require a personal shuttle immediately. I turned to look at Mindy. They'll find us, I whispered. If you run for it, maybe I can... Mindy stopped me, shaking her head and gesturing over the head of the approaching Weimar. As I watched, the ambassador leapt from his seat towards the secret doorway behind the bookshelves. Weimar, he shouted. There's someone inside. We've been overheard, you fool. Weimar immediately returned to the ambassador's side. Both of them stood listening to a deep voice, muttering urgently within. I turned to Mindy. Her mouth was moving, and even though I was kneeling next to her, I couldn't hear anything. Just the voice coming from the concealed room. Quickly, open the door, snapped the ambassador. Search everywhere. He produced a gun and followed his secretary into the secret annex. The moment they were inside, Mindy and I swished back the curtain and hurried to the door. We could still hear Ambassador Dromio barking orders to his secretary as we raced for the lift to make our escape. Doctor, you're all right, I said breathlessly, seeing him sitting cross-legged on the seat outside the medical quarters, absorbed in playing his recorder. Ah, there you are, Jamie, he replied, jumping up to meet me. Thank goodness for that, he said, clapping me on my shoulder. I found out that Helicon Prime is being drawn out of the Golden Section, away from the pacifying forces. I was worried you were in more danger than I'd suspected. Aye, well, I thought the ambassador had got rid of you, I said. The doctor instantly frowned, looking annoyed. Just as effective, Jamie, he muttered. Ambassador Dromio used his authority to place a banning order on anyone going near Galax's body. I only had the briefest chance to examine him. He shook his head. An unscrupulous chap, he concluded. Worse than that, Doctor, I answered. He's poisoned 2 other guests in his rooms. What? Jamie, details, the doctor ordered. The doctor looked horrified as I reported what had happened. Mindy and I only managed to get out because she threw her voice, I concluded. Mindy, oh goodness me, moaned the doctor. Mindy, why could have been in such awful danger, he said. And you too, Jamie, he added, catching my expression. Oh dear, we're in hotter water than I appreciated. Where is Mindy now? She's returned to her room, I said. I think she had quite a fright seeing those 2 men bumped off like that. Of course, responded the doctor. How dreadful for her. So, what's Fenris? What does it mean, I asked. The doctor shrugged. Fenris? It is very far from here, Jamie. He pressed his hands together in front of his mouth, as he sometimes did when recalling odd details. The Fenris colony was abandoned long ago. He clasped his hands behind his back and began pacing. Yes, that's it. Fenris was, for a while, one of the most successful of the frontier colonies, innovative and pioneering, but the planet proved unstable. The doctor stopped and frowned. I've never heard of a rescue mission, though. I always assumed the colonists had perished. So what did the ambassador mean? I said, Hey, Doctor, what if there was some sort of rescue mission, and that's when he stole this Fennis treasure? It's possible, Jamie, the Doctor agreed. And now he's getting rid of all his partners to keep the treasure for himself, I finished, pleased with my theory. Well, maybe, the Doctor seemed less certain, except, he added with a sly grin, it rather sounds as if Ambassador Dromio doesn't know where the Tontine's treasure is hidden. The Doctor's mischievous expression gave me an idea. Doctor, I think I've got a plan. The Doctor's face became troubled. Oh dear, Jamie, he bluttered. I really don't think it's quite the time for it. No, listen, will you? What if we let the Ambassador think we know where the treasure is hidden, and then we can confront him? Even get him to confess to killing Galax, Romeo, and the others, if this treasure is so important to him. I'd rather not, if it's all the same to you, Jamie, the Doctor replied. Not if Helican Prime is somehow being forced from the Golden Section. The Doctor rubbed his hands together. No, I think we need to be careful. What would happen and wait for our best chance? I mean, after all, we don't know what or where the Fennis treasure is either, do we? As much as I didn't like the idea of waiting around to make our next move, I had to agree that the Doctor was right. After all, the drift away from the Golden Section had started to have its effect. Our bridge party had to be abandoned and the team separated after an argument over the scars turned nasty. Elsewhere, a guest sitting on the edge of a fountain had been pushed in by some children. I hoped it wasn't the Gorgle Chine. The Doctor seemed strangely calm despite all this. I watched him sitting at a table in one of Helican Prime's lounges, deep in thought, swinging his napkin in time with the band. He looked like the perfect idling guest, but I knew he was up to something. What is it, Doctor? I asked eventually, unable as ever to second-guess him. Pennsylvania 65 million, I think, he answered. A curious arrangement, though. Sometimes it was impossible to get any real talk out of him. The more you tried, the less sense he'd make when he was in one of those moods. It was one of the things that made me consider whether, deep down, for all his otherworldly wonderings, the Doctor was, in fact, English. No, I tried again. What are you thinking? The Doctor looked puzzled. I don't know, Jamie. I haven't finished thinking it yet. It was definitely one of those moods. Ah, here's Mindy, beamed the Doctor. The Doctor had sent her a message asking if she would care to join us after her terrible ordeal. For a moment, I thought he was going to ask me to deliver it. Instead, he found a waiter to do it.
Doctor? Jamie? Good to see you both. Did you hear about our adventure earlier, Doctor?
The Doctor nodded his head energetically. Oh, yes, Jamie told me all about it, he smiled. And I think you were very brave. Thank you for getting Jamie away safely, he added. Hey, now hold on, I tried to say, but the Doctor carried on regardless. In fact, I wondered if you'd mind, if it wasn't too much trouble, signing one of your albums for me. He took a flat, star-shaped object from his pocket and placed it on the table. It was crystal with an image of Mindy floating just beneath the surface. It's one of my favourites, he added.
Oh, Doctor. Harpsian wave technology, how completely quaint. Of course I will.
Mindy started to sing, but only the briefest note emerged from her mouth before it was too high for me to hear, and as I watched, the star began to tremble. Across the image of Mindy's face, her name slowly appeared, along with an X. The Doctor seemed delighted. Oh, thank you so much, and I've got this for you, he announced, rummaging in another pocket and handing her the yo-yo I'd won. Hey, I said, I gave you that. And now I'm giving it to Mindy, the Doctor said impatiently.
Thank you, Doctor. But what about Jamie, my fellow adventurer?
Well, he was quite taken with your pendant, the Doctor said leadingly. Maybe a small sonic signature? I've got some string on me somewhere. I was dumbstruck. Even by his standards, this was brazen. Mindy, however, undid the pendant around her neck.
Here, this can be yours.
Are you sure? I said. She handed it to me. Mindy nodded, smilingly. The Doctor looked at me, his face the picture of envy. That's very generous of you, my dear, he said. Extremely generous. Mind you say thank you, Jamie? A waiter approached us. With the Ambassador's compliments, he announced, presenting us with a tray on which lay 3 of the most delicate flowers I'd ever seen. What are they, Doctor? I said. Do you eat them or wear them?
They're asphodels. Intoxicatingly pleasant, but they take ages to eat. Go on, try and pick one up.
I didn't understand what Mindy meant, but the smell was amazing, making me suddenly hungry. I reached for the nearest flower, and it seemed to shimmer around my fingers, as if I was clutching at smoke or mist. I found it impossible to even touch, let alone pick it up.
That's why they take so long to eat.
The doctor, I said, baffled. What's going on? Doctor? Hey, doctor! The doctor, too, was absorbed in trying to get hold of one of the flowers. There's a knack to it, Jamie, he explained. Asphodels are so delicate and fragile, they're on the very edge of our reality, almost about to disappear entirely. It requires infinite patience to keep them in your perception long enough to... There, he said, lifting an asphodel, only for it to slip through his fingers and float back to the table. Bother, he said. I've never been able to do it.
Doctor, new arrivals. It's Ambassador Dromio and Weimar.
Instantly, the doctor became serious. The ambassador gazed around the lounge, smiling thinly when he saw us, and took a seat close to the door. Waiters quickly descended, attentive to his every whim. Just look at that, I complained. Anyone would think he owned the place. Doctor's head was bowed, but he was watching the ambassador's every movement. Yes, he said quietly. Wouldn't you just? Very good, Jamie.
Doctor, do you mean you think the ambassador secretly runs Helican Prime? From behind the scenes or something?
The doctor bit his lip. Oh, I don't really know, my dear, but I'm sure it would be quite impossible to prove, he sighed. But it might explain something that's been puzzling me. Why a meeting of the last members of the Tontine was held here? Without realizing it, all three of us were staring over at the ambassador and his secretary. The ambassador was seemingly in conversation with one of the brightly coloured fish, until Weimar told him we were watching. Waving away the fish, the ambassador called over a waiter. A growl distracted me. I turned to see, a short distance from where we were sitting, a huge, hairy creature arguing with a waiter. As the fish passed them, the creature swung its arm as if swatting at a fly. The fish darted away. Oh no, the doctor shook his head sadly. It seems Helican Prime really is leaving the golden section. Perhaps it would be as well to try a small idea of mine immediately. I knew it, I said happily. I thought you had a plan. Thank you, Jamie, the doctor replied. A short while later, I was creeping cautiously down another corridor at the doctor's suggestion. He had asked Mindy to take the stage and join the band giving an impromptu concert. Almost as soon as she started singing, I understood why the doctor admired her so much. And quickly the lounge became crowded with guests, all arriving to hear the famous Mindy Wire running through some of her best-known songs in a free concert. As the room filled, the doctor slipped away, telling me, "If the ambassador leaves, follow him, Jamie, but keep out of sight, and please be careful." While everyone else applauded when Mindy finished another song, the ambassador and Weimar also left the lounge. I hurried after them, drawing a few hostile looks as I pushed my way through the crowd. The ambassador stopped to speak to one of the waiters, and I hid in the doorway, keeping well out of the way as the waiters marched into the lounge, looking determined and unfriendly. I was just about to leave when I heard someone moving in the far corner of the room. There was a gruff sound, and the hairy creature I'd seen earlier rose from behind a bench. Blood marked its mouth, and one of the bright fish was clenched in its paw, twitching uselessly. I rushed from the room. Hoping that I'd not lost him, I peered round the next corner and saw the ambassador and Weimar letting themselves into a set of rooms. I waited, and after a while they reappeared and carried on down the corridor. As I passed, I saw that the room had been ransacked. The ambassador and Weimar searched through 3 more rooms as I followed them, leaving each one completely wrecked, although they didn't appear to remove anything. The ambassador seemed to be getting increasingly annoyed as they progressed. When I heard Weimar say something to the ambassador that drew an angry, shouted response, I decided I should keep further back, just in case. At the end of this corridor, we reached another of the halls with a fountain. I waited until they had crossed the hall before following, and saw a broken chair sunk in the churning water, while a discarded hat bobbed on the top. Helican Prime was breaking down, the violence and aggression resurfacing from the smothering calm. I continued to follow the ambassador and Weimar, waiting while they broke their way through yet another guest's belongings, the sounds of destruction frantic and wilder than before. I lingered at a turning, waiting for them to move on, and, from somewhere behind me, an alarm began to wail. "Nothing!" I heard the ambassador spit as they left. "Where is it?" he demanded of Weimar. the end of this corridor, I hesitated again. The ambassador and Weimar were approaching the lift area. When the lift chimed softly, they hid in a doorway, exactly as I was doing some way behind them. As the doors opened, to my horror, I saw the doctor scurry out with something under his arm. He had only walked a few paces when Weimar stepped from the doorway and raised a gun, aiming it straight at the doctor's back. I knew it was too far for me to run and tackle him. I was about to shout to the doctor when I remembered the passkey. Steady, I told myself. You've only the one chance. And then I threw it. The shining disc soared through a beautiful arc, hitting Weimar in the back of the head with a satisfying crack. Weimar staggered, his gun firing a flash harmlessly into the floor, and the doctor leapt into the air as if he'd been stung. "Jamie!" yelled the doctor. Weimar snarled and looked between me, the doctor, and the ambassador. He swayed and held a hand to his head. "Fool!" he hissed at me, the gun wavering in his hand. "Doctor," the ambassador said, "you must have a charmed life. Such a shame to lose it." The doctor clasped his arms across his chest, concealing the object he carried. "Lose it? Oh, I don't intend to be as careless as that, Ambassador Dromio," he replied. The ambassador turned to look at me. "And as for you," he said, "there is no one to interfere on your behalf." Somewhere above us we heard the dull, crumping sound of an explosion, which shuddered through the walls. "Did you hear that?" cried the doctor. "Helican Prime is collapsing. By forcing it from the golden section, you're placing it under terrible pressures. It could even rip apart. You've imperiled yourself as much as everyone else." For a moment, the ambassador looked alarmed. "Only until I locate the Fennis treasure, Doctor, and then I can leave this forsaken place. And now I have you to help me, or Weimar will shoot your companion." "Aye, no doubt you've thought of your own escape," I said. There was another terrible greeting sound, and we all felt the corridor lurch. A look of distaste crossed the doctor's face. "All this for a few precious metals or minerals? Does it seem worth it, Ambassador?" he complained. The ambassador laughed dryly. "Metals? Minerals? Is that what you think? I don't believe you know what the Fennis treasure is, Doctor." "Oh, of course, you're probably right," agreed the doctor. "I don't claim to know absolutely everything. Maybe I've got it quite muddled, barking up the wrong tree, as they say." His reasonable tone took the ambassador off guard. "But, Ambassador," he said firmly, "I do know what a nessus looks like. I do know the number of eyes it usually has." For a moment, the ambassador looked blank. Then his face twisted with rage. "The Fennis treasure?" he spluttered. "It was hidden in the nessus?" "So it was staring you in the face all along," I said. "Quite literally." The ambassador was furious. "Weimar, kill them. Kill them both now," he commanded. "Careful, Ambassador," warned the doctor. He shifted the object in his arms, unwrapping the sheet, concealing the mounted nessus head. "You wouldn't want anything to happen to this, would you? This brittle, crystalline matrix." The ambassador gestured to Weimar to lower his gun. "Doctor, you cannot," urged the ambassador. "Fennis was a gathering of some of the most brilliant minds for decades, a community thriving on its own intellect and enhancing its own genius, an enclave enlightenment, a frontier renaissance. The mining techniques they developed were startlingly advanced. Only Fennis itself was unstable. By the time the rescue mission reached them, the planet was disintegrating. We couldn't save the colonists, only their databanks and the contents of their brilliant minds." The sound of rending metal echoed along the corridor, pursued by a scream. "Doctor," said the ambassador urgently, "I'll share it with you. Half the Fennis treasure, half of that great collection of genius. Think what could be achieved with it, the power it could give you. What do you say?" "That's quite an offer, Ambassador. A man of science, a scholar of the cosmos, might well be tempted." For a moment he seemed to be caught by the nessus eyes. "Jamie," he said suddenly, looking at me, "what would you do?" The ambassador and Weimar both turned their gaze to me. I wasn't sure what the doctor wanted me to say. Was this supposed to be a distraction, a clever shifting of attention? The doctor's face was unreadable. He seemed as expectant as the others. I shrugged. What good's a clever idea, or half a clever idea, if you're certain to be smashed to smithereens? Helican Prime made another lurch, knocking us all off balance and dimming the lights. "It won't be long now," grimaced the doctor. "Soon the energy links will fail and your escape will be impossible." The ambassador looked panicked. "Doctor, the Fennis treasure, the crystals, we could split them." The doctor shook his head. Jamie gave you your answer, he said, his voice solemn and final. Further down the corridor, the floor buckled and sparks spat from the ceiling. As the lights flickered once again, Weimar suddenly darted from the ambassador's side and fled. The ambassador shouted after him, the calls of coward and traitor echoing as he disappeared. Abandoned, the ambassador turned on the doctor. "Give me the crystals," he said, his voice rich with menace. "Hand them over to me now." He advanced on the doctor steadily. The doctor swept the head behind his back and stepped away. "Never," he said. "If it's anyone's, this belongs to the descendants of the colonists." "Believe me, I'll kill you myself, Doctor, if I have to," the ambassador said, raising his hands and reaching for the doctor's throat. I grabbed the ambassador's shoulders and spun him away from the doctor. He stumbled to one knee. "No," I said, placing myself between them. "You'll not hurt the doctor." For a moment, in the dim light, the ambassador looked at us with murderous rage. Then there was the sound of tearing metal and the floor started to pitch and shift. Smoke leaked from the walls and more sparks burst from the ceiling. With a snarl, the ambassador turned from us and raced along the listening corridor. "Ah, well done, Jamie," the doctor said, sounding relieved. "That was close, wasn't it?" "He's escaping," I complained. "A rat leaving a sinking ship. This whole place has had it." "Oh, I don't know about that, Jamie," replied the doctor. "If I can just get us to the TARDIS, I might be able to try a little something. Nudge Helicon Prime back into its proper orbit, as it were, and I wouldn't worry too much about Ambassador Dromio," he added mischievously. "I'm sure he's got plenty of tricky questions to look forward to." Nurse Muir. You're still here. Thank you. No doubt you'll think me mad for telling you such a tale. Maybe. I think the memories are going already, sinking below the surface. It's like catching the bits of a dream when you first wake, only to lose them once more. Now I'm not sure. The doctor told the ambassador we would return the Fennis treasure to the descendants of the colony. How? He had as little idea of where we went as anyone. The TARDIS had a mind of its own. I can't remember what happened next. I can't remember the journey.
You never made it.
Nurse Muir, I thought you sounded like...
No, Jamie. Nurse Dwyer. You must have misheard me.
Mindy? It's you. What are you doing here? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
No, I don't suppose you do, Jamie, do you? It took me a long time to unravel the clever little doctor's scheming, but I finally saw through the smokescreen and hall of mirrors. Even his bluffing of the ambassador. That parlour trick with the Nessus. I knew where I needed to come for the real treasure. Oh, did I injure you when I landed? I don't know whether that's clumsy or fortuitous.
The doctor's scheme? Mindy, I don't know. I don't remember.
The scheme to hide the Fennis treasure. How much of it did the doctor have planned all along? Oh, but of course you don't know, do you? You never did. Poor Jamie. As much in the dark as the rest of us.
The doctor didn't hide the treasure. Mindy, he was saving it from the ambassador and then Helicon Prime. He was trying to rescue Helicon Prime from something.
The doctor shunted Helicon Prime back into the golden section and then disappeared with the Fennis treasure. You really are starting to forget it all again, aren't you? In that case, give the treasure back to me now before I have to claw your mind apart to find it.
Give it back to you? Mindy, were you part of the Fennis Tontine after all?
My father was. It was his expertise that preserved the collective memory of the Fennis colony. But he died suddenly as so many others, I realise now, so he never told me where it was hidden. Such a brilliant and simple concealment, I never guessed. I really believed that Romeo had it all along. Now, hand it back to me or I'll deal with you like I did Romeo. Volatile light. Did the doctor really suspect Dromio was capable of such subtle manipulation of sound waves? Come along, Jamie, or I'll sing you to sleep.
I watched Mindy step backwards to the door and turn the key. As I struggled from the bed, I heard a low, keening note. The walls began to rattle and the note altered in pitch so that I stopped hearing it, and started instead to feel it. First as a pulse in my stomach, then an ache in my chest. It hurt. I doubled over, feeling my arms and legs shaking, and tried to drag air into my lungs. Mindy was killing me. Around me, the room was shuddering and quaking. I sank to my knees and tried to block the sound, pressing my hands to the side of my head, but it was no good. As I crouched forward, the pendant swung free from my neck. Mindy's pendant, my gift back on Helican Prime. I fumbled with the pendant. My fingers brushed the knot and a wave of sound floated free. Without thinking what I was doing, I began working at the knot. As I prized the threads apart, I could hear voices and shouts for help, cries for release. The freer the knot became, the clearer I could hear the dozens of voices. Across the room, Mindy realised what I was doing and shouted at me to stop. The room was crowded with voices now, a confused chorus urging me, encouraging me, insisting I untangle them. With a shriek, Mindy lunged forward, drawing a deep breath, ready for a final deadly performance. As cracks spiraled across the walls, I scrabbled at the loosening knot with my numbed fingers, certain at any moment Mindy's next breath could rock the flesh from my bones. I unfastened the final few twisted threads as Mindy tried to grab me, and a burst of pure sound knocked me backwards. I came to under the shredded kindling that had been my bed. The room where I'd recovered from my accident out on the moors was reduced to matchwood, as if pounded by some huge, impossible hand. I managed to raise myself to my knees, shaking my head in an effort to clear a terrible aching fuzziness. I am James Robert McCrimmon. I am the son of a piper. I am a Highlander. I know all of this to be true. I understand all of this. And yet none of it explains how I come to be in a wrecked room with an impossibly knotted pendant in my hand from which voices seem to whisper. I don't know what it means, or why a lass's voice promises that one day it will have revenge on me. And someone called the doctor.
Coming soon from Big Finish.
Alistair, I need your help.
I recall something my father once said to me on the day I told him I was going to join the army. Alistair, he said, in life as on the field of battle, there are old soldiers and then there are bold soldiers. But there are very few old, bold soldiers.
You must come to the Schloss as soon as you can.
Wear the uniform long enough, and the truth of that will out. What we do, it takes its toll. On those of us left behind, and on those of us who are not.
Something is very wrong here.
Kriegerskind. Not a warm and welcoming place by any stretch of the imagination. The rain did little to soften it. A sheer grey turret of stone rising out of the German countryside against heavy clouds.
Time is against me. You must come quickly.
To absent friends, to old soldiers.
Here I am, vaguely facing Fraser Hines, who has recreated James Robert McCrimmon.
That's right, yes.
What's it feel like to be Jamie after all these years?
Wonderful. It really is. It brings back happy memories. I mean, I always say it's 3 of the happiest years I ever spent in my long acting career, was doing those 3 years. And I always say that I'd still be in Doctor Who now. If Patrick had his wife nagging him and I had my agent nagging us to leave, we'd still be there now, because we were having a ball. It was a wonderful, wonderful, happy time. And people at conventions say, Fraser, how do you remember all these stories? How do you remember that? Because your memory, your brain remembers the good times. And I suppose you block out the bad times. It was very, very happy times.
Now, you nailed Patrick Troughton for me today. The impersonation was perfect.
Well, when you work with somebody that long, and Patrick and I began, we were telepathic. He could look at me and I could look at him, and we both knew what we were thinking, and we'd go and scrag Wendy Padbury, or go and grab Nicholas Courtney by the TARDIS. Very nice. Yes, I miss it. And I'm very fond. Obviously, I was very, very fond of Patrick, and I do that convention when people say, do Patrick. Yes, Jamie, it is a big one, isn't it? We do that kind of stuff.
And the little cough, that's something else I'd not noticed. But of course, the instant you did it, it seemed absolutely
You watch, next time you watch an old Troughton episode, you'll see him. Now then, Jamie, what we're going to do is, and he does his little cough.
And is that an actor's trick?
Well, I don't know whether it's a trick or not, but I've found that I do it now. It's Patrick's morphing into me, because I find sometimes if I'm doing something and I'm talking to somebody and whether it's not a nervous cough, it's I don't know.
It's interesting that Peter Purvis, who also did one of these, did a similar thing with Hartnell.
Oh, right, yeah.
Hartnell had a similar trick, or whatever.
Yeah.
A sort of, and the instant he did it...
Well, that's right, yes. Hartnell. I've seen something when he goes, yes, he does, yes. Billy Hart, yeah, that's right, yeah.
You've reprised the role of Jamie a couple of times, is that right? Before?
Yes, well after the black and whites, yes. Patrick and I, we went. I did the Five Doctors, which I was supposed to be in all of the Five Doctors, because J&T wanted me. But I just finished pantomime, and I said to the Emmerdale people, "Oh, by the way, I need another 5 weeks off," because They went, no, we want it back in Emmerdale. I said, "No, I've got this BBC doctor." No. So I rang J&T. I said, "J&T, they won't let me off another 5 weeks." He said, "Well, Fraser, if you get a day off, let me know. If you've got a day off, let me know, and I will fit you in somewhere. I want Jamie there." So I got my schedule. I thought, next Wednesday, Thursday. So I rang up J&T. I got next Wednesday, Thursday off. He said, "Right, fine, I'm going to write a little part for you." And when I got there, he sent me the script, and it was, no, Doctor, and that was it. That's all I had. And I still say, if I thought, I'm not going to come all the way down to London just to do, I'm Fraser Hines, Jamie McCrimmon. I'm not going to say all that, just as little as that. But I went down, and we went to the Acton Hilton and opened the door of the rehearsal room, and Patrick and I just went, yeah, and we threw ourselves and padded on the floor, rolling and giggling and laughing. And all the other doctors were there thinking, we never had that fun with our assistants, And I did these 3 coughs, and at the end of the filming the next day, J&T said, "Fraser, it was just like I'd got you and Patrick out of the prop cupboard, dusted you off with a feather duster, put the key in the back, and put you on. You haven't changed. You're just the two of you. Would you like to do some more?" I said, "Not half." So that's how I got the 2 doctors. So if I'd said, no, I'm not going to do the 5 doctors, I'd never done the 2 doctors. And of course, Patrick and I, we did the 2 doctors, and it was great, great fun. We flew to Seville, a location, It's supposed to be New Orleans to begin with, and then the American money or something happened. I'd just signed to go back to Emmerdale after that. Otherwise, I was going to say to J&T, "Look, I know I leave at the end of this, but there's any chances, because I love Doctor Who. I really love doing Doctor Who. But I couldn't. I know I signed for another year for Emmerdale. Otherwise, I would have said to J&T, "Look, can I just pop back? Can you find Jamie somewhere?" And I think Patrick would have been quite. I wonder why we could have 2 doctors. I think Patrick was quite interested in doing it as well, because we just had, the great fun. And we had little practical jokes. And there's a postcard where Shockey's got us in the dungeons, and the TARDIS, and he's pointing this gun at us, and I've got my finger down the end of the gun. It's all that kind of stuff that we were allowed to do. And nobody said that's twee, that's stupid. I mean, it was lovely, little things like that. And J&T let me do Jamieisms, where Jamie can actually say something really idiotic, but people don't say, "Oh, that's daft." It's the sort of thing that Jamie, because he was not an intelligent person as such, I could say what I call Jamieisms. One of the part of the script was I had to say, "Oh, I've just heard he was an anagram." Now, I said, Jamie wouldn't know the word androgam. So I obviously told Patrick, and I said, he said he was an angry man. And Patrick, angry man? No, Jamie, was it androgam? Aye, that's it, Doctor. That's so. I was, little things like that we put into the two doctors, which was great. And of course, JNT. When we started the opening episode, when I was looking on the scanner, and I said the famous line. I was supposed to say, "Look at the size of that scanner," and I said, "Look at the size of that one, Doctor." Yes, Jamie, it is a big one, isn't it? And JNT said, "No, no, it's not the script." And Patrick said, at the beginning of every story, Jamie always looks and finds something and says, "Doctor, look at the size of that thing." And I always say, "Yes, Jamie, it is a big one, isn't it?" And if you look at some of the stories that we've done, there's always it'll creep in there.
It's a shame it couldn't creep into this one, really.
Yes, it is. Maybe maybe I should have looked at the leaves at the beginning and said, "Look at the size of those, Doctor." Yes, they are big, aren't they, Jamie? We could have done that. But, as I say, it's been great doing this today, and bringing back. It does bring happy memories back, because I can the way the script has been written. Whoever wrote the Doctor's part, I think he's got Patrick to a T. Now Jamie, and he's got those lovely little intones that we had between us. Jamie, no, don't be silly. I know what I'm doing. There's a pretty girl here, so I'm going to chatter up, kind of thing. He's got it to a T. So that's why it was so easy to sort of to do the Patrick voice.
And thank you for wearing the kilt as well. That really
yes, that's quite all right. Yes, I wore it upside down as you requested. Now I look like a shuttlecock.
To absent friends. I recall something my father once said to me on the day I told him I was going to join the army. Alistair, he said, in life, as on the field of battle, there are old soldiers, and then there are bold soldiers. But there are very few old, bold soldiers. I didn't know what he meant at the time, but he was right. That's the thing, you see. Wear the uniform long enough, and the truth of that will out. What we do, it takes its toll. On those of us left behind, and on those of us who are not. I knew a couple of fellows, bold chaps, quite alike in many ways, both willing to risk their lives for their friends and for the greater good, both equally adept at ignoring the rules when it suited them, both men I'd take a bullet for. Gone now, though. One of them I imagine I'll see again when I least expect it. Changing, and yet changeless, like the seasons in its way. And the other? Well, perhaps I'll see him too someday. To absent friends, comrades in arms, to old soldiers. Kriegerskind. Not a warm and welcoming place by any stretch of the imagination. The rain did little to soften it. A sheer grey turret of stone rising out of the German countryside against heavy clouds. The castle, the Schloss, I should say, dates back hundreds of years. But the place had always been a fortress. The Nazis, the medieval lords, the Romans, the nomadic tribesmen before them, all saw the obvious strategic value of Kriegskind. A high point, easily defensible, remote, imposing, a stronghold. I hadn't seen the inside of the place in years, not since UNIT had moved in and taken it for themselves. It was a good choice to house one of our secure facilities. There were dozens of them across the world, garrisons and listening posts, eyes open and fingers on triggers, watching for signs of invasion, paranormal events, and unexplained anomalies. Unit business, as ever. All that time and the place looked a little different, except for the helipad in the courtyard and the forest of microwave antennae atop the keep. I imagine it hadn't changed in centuries. I remember that it was a few weeks after the situation at Wenley Moor. The chill on me wasn't just from the rain. I'd made some hard decisions. A nest of Silurians on British soil wiped out under my orders. That had not sat well with the doctor. He had stormed out of Unit HQ after a rather full and frank exchange of views between us. At the time, I didn't think he'd come back. Like so many brilliant men, he was insufferable at times. "They were intelligent beings, Brigadier," he fumed. "Your two races could have coexisted peacefully." I saw the matter differently, of course. I saw a threat. I removed it, or at least I thought I had at the time. But that's what a soldier does. We defend. And we make the difficult choices. The doctor thought otherwise. Quite how Miss Shaw tolerated the fellow's moods was beyond me. She went after him, told me she'd bring him around. I didn't question my own judgment. The Silurians represented a clear and present danger, but despite my certainty, it had not been an easy choice. That's why, I suppose, I was ready to step away when the message came. get some perspective, as it were. And to be quite honest, when I read the telex, I was rather concerned.
Alistair, I need your help.
Colonel Heinrich Conrad, part of Germany's contribution to UNIT's global aegis. Good man, strong as an ox, and pin-sharp to boot. Kriegskin base was his command, and he'd done a lot with it. His technical people were top-notch. What they'd learned from researching the debris of past attacks had been invaluable to us.
You must come to the Schloss as soon as you can.
I first met him on a nature exercise in the 60s, back when the only threat we thought we had was the Russians. Fine soldier, leader of men. We've been good friends ever since.
Something is very wrong here.
Not a man to cry wolf. Not one to ask for aid unless it was his only option. And the tone. There was something in those words. They rang a sour note.
Time is against me. You must come quickly.
I had to learn why. So I went.
Brigadier, welcome to Kriegskind. I am Major Erno Schrader, Colonel Conrad's second in command. I am acting as base commander while the colonel is indisposed.
I never met Schrader before, but his type were like weeds sprouting in every army I'd ever seen. Sharp-faced, acid little men forced into the uniform as if it could barely contain them. Narrow eyes, wound tight, anger held barely in check, looking for someone to bark at. He did all but turn me around and show me the door then and there. In return, I was rather forthright. It was wet, I had travelled quite poorly, and I was determined not to about face and go home. Not without looking Heinrich in the eyes first. I do hate to pull rank, but that was what it took. I suppose sometimes it's useful to have your reputation precede you. Well, finally, Schrader relented.
This way, Brigadier.
He ground out each word like it was a piece of broken glass, making noises about security clearance this and compartmentalization that. And I smelled fear on him. Get shot at enough times and fear becomes an old friend. You learn how to see it. In yourself, as well as in other men. And I saw it in Kriegskind. Averted glances, hurried steps. Doors closed too quickly as we walked past them. Despite all of Schrader's assurances to the contrary, this was a base on high alert. I had some recollection of the castle's interior layout, and I approached the steps to the upper tiers.
No, Brigadier, not that way. Follow me, please. From here.
It was then, with some mild alarm, that I realized where Schrader was taking me. Good Lord.
Alistair, I need your help.
He was as pale as death, as if his vitality had been drained, sucked out through the festoon of tubes and wires connected to the equipment by his sickbed. The room was a bleak, miserable place. Schrader must have seen the disgust on my face.
This is the medical ward and laboratory facility, Brigadier. It is one of the most secure areas of the base. Some of the situations we deal with, well, I'm sure you understand. But this also makes it the safest place to be. The colonel is being given the best treatment. Everything is under control. All is well. You see, there was really no need for you to come.
I looked at Heinrich Conrad, and a well man was not what I saw.
He should not be disturbed.
I ignored the suggestion. When I came to his bedside, I saw Heinrich's eyes flutter open. Gaze was watery and weak. Where was the hardy, vital man I knew? This was just a shadow of him, a faded grey copy.
Alistair, you are too late.
Too late for what, Heinrich? What's wrong?
I can see them coming, moving through the ages, rising up, killers and the kid. They are all in danger. You should not have come here.
You sent me a message.
Did I? I did. Doesn't matter now. Too late. The attack! The enemy forces are massing! They're coming!
An attack? By whom? From where?
They won't stop until it is all destroyed! Destroyed! All of it destroyed.
I've seen many things in my career that have left me unsettled. Look, the horrible void in Conrad's eyes that day is one of them. I watched him waver between lucidity and incoherence, calling out, at first enraged and then terrified. It was a dreadful thing to behold, to see a man betrayed by his own mind.
You understand now, Brigadier. This is why I was reluctant to bring you here. The Colonel is a respected officer. To see him in such a state... He has been diagnosed as suffering from an acute mental breakdown, a form of post-traumatic stress disorder.
I'd seen similar things in other men. Given the mind-bending phenomena that unit staff confronted in the course of their duties, it was inevitable that some of us would break under the strain of it. It was our own cruel brand of shell shock. But I'm referring to other men. The Heinrich Conrad I knew had an iron will. It was not in him to simply collapse, not like this. Schrader disagreed.
He must remain in our care, here. You know that better than I.
Unit looks after its own, you see. Conventional psychiatric help in civilian hospitals was out of the question.
The Colonel has the highest security clearance. We cannot risk the disclosure of that knowledge. It was my choice to deal with this internally. I am sure you concur.
I did. And perhaps if it had been another man lying in that bed, I would have left then and there. But I knew Conrad, and I trusted him as much as I trusted Yates, Benton, Miss Shaw, even the doctor. And I couldn't walk away. Not without knowing why. When Schrader at last understood that his attempts to induce me to leave were falling on deaf ears, he had a junior officer find me temporary quarters in the East Tower. Seeing Heinrich had left me more troubled than I cared to admit. I felt drained by the experience. It was only when I was alone I began questioning the decision to remain. Realistically, what could I do for my friend? His message had been a cry for help. Perhaps if I had known earlier, I might have been able to get him the help he needed before I should have left. I should have, but I couldn't. There was something, just a feeling I couldn't define for you if I tried. You could call it a soldier's sense, if you like. Nothing preternatural, just the experience of 100 battles fought, the ability to taste the wrongness in the air. I went to sleep that night, troubled. There was something amiss. The sword nearly took my head clean from my shoulders. I reacted, instinct instead of thought, tumbling from the bed, fingers closing around the grip of the Webley. I brought it to bear upon my assailant. There he was, clad in the battle armor of his legion, mud and blood across his breastplate, so close I could smell it. His face empty, blank, in motionless sketch. The dull blade of the gladius glittering in the moonlight through the window. A young man in the uniform of a Roman legionary standing before me, there and yet not there. He had a haze about him, for want of a better word. He reminded me of painted glass, all translucent and ephemeral. He attacked me again. And then, gone, like smoke. I had, so it appeared, killed a ghost. One learns to take these things in one's stride. Yeti, murderous shoproom dummies, Cybermen. As unit's adversaries go, the horde of ghostly legionaries was almost, well, usual. Schrader and his troops had engaged a group of the invaders in the Great Hall. There were quite a few of them, but the Major's men had them corralled. I could see immediately that this had not been their first encounter with this sort of thing. I lent my pistol to their effort. When they fell, the Romans went without a cry or a scream. They simply faded away. You might expect a bullet to pass through an apparition and leave it unscathed, but these phantoms discorporated, left nothing behind them. Nothing but our dead or injured men, mind. I saw a young Malay chap whose arm had been opened from elbow to shoulder by a sword cut. Hardly the work of an illusion. Was this the attack Conrad warned me of? And if so, what the devil sort of enemy had we been fighting? I demanded answers from Major Schrader in no uncertain terms.
You know of Kriegskind's history, yes? The castle sits atop the site of an ancient Roman garrison. There have been incursions, Brigadier. Not ghosts in the conventional sense, but quasi-physical forms. And the phenomena is reoccurring with increasing rapidity.
I will admit, it took me a moment to moderate my annoyance at the man for keeping this from me, and from unit command. It explained much, though. The climate of tension I had sensed on arrival, Schrader's attempts to make me leave. He admitted to it, shamefaced. The Major insisted that the issue was an internal one, something that he could deal with.
If I call in Geneva, this will be taken out of my hands. The Colonel's condition will come to light and he will be stripped of his rank. Kriegskind and all the important work we do here will be shut down.
A part of me understood. When you serve, there's a bond that you share with your men and respect. You deal with an issue inside the regiment. You protect your own. But one has to ask, how far does that go? I looked at the Malay lad. If it had just been Conrad, that would be one thing, but men were in harm's way here, and it was clear to me that Schrader had no idea how to deal with it. I think he resented me a little. It was becoming clear that Schrader had come to unit without a full accounting of what he would confront there. Out of his depth, he must have read that train of thought on my face.
Brigadier, perhaps I could call on your experience with similar phenomena to assist us. But you understand, of course, that I will retain my authority as base commander.
It would have been well within my remit to overrule Schrader and assume command of the facility. Hindsight, I shouldn't have hesitated. Geneva would have backed me, but I knew that if I did, I'd make an enemy of him, and at that moment, I needed him on my side. So I agreed. Schrader was afraid, and it was important to keep him focused. So, for the moment, I decided to indulge his fantasy that he was still in charge. But we both knew that was a lie. We were under siege from an enemy that could move through walls, that could strike in a heartbeat. No, the Major wasn't in charge. Neither of us were. Schrader's men had secured the radio room in the aftermath of the last incursion and placed it under heavy guard. The men said it was to protect the communications gear from any attacks, but I had little doubt it was Schrader's way of ensuring no outside contact with HQ. I had other means, though. A device, something the doctor had concocted in his lab. I'm not a man to shy away from a challenge, you understand. But I'd be a fool if I said the situation wasn't somewhat beyond me. My message was simple. I asked him for his help, although after our last conversation I had my doubts the doctor would respond. In the meantime, I decided to do as much as I could to seek any connection between the incursions of these figures from the past and Conrad's condition. Was it a confrontation with the phantoms that had brought him to this, or was there more to it?
Who is there?
Your friend, Lethbridge Stewart. What's happening here, Heinrich? What happened to you?
I went too far, Alistair. I saw the threat and I went too far. But I could not let them go alone. You realize that, don't you? For the sake of the men. They have to know you are willing to make the same sacrifices. But they died, Alistair. They all died. Only me now.
Did Schrader do this to you?
Schrader, a decent soldier, but limited. Afraid.
Afraid of what?
The unknown, Alistair. The invaders. I can see them coming. I know you can see them as well. We are so small, aren't we? So very small in the scheme of things. And yet they still come. How can we fight them?
The Phantoms?
Coming to take it. To take everything. To destroy us. Destroy it all. There are so many of them, and we are so weak, so limited. We cannot let them win, Alistair. We must not.
He became more agitated with every word, his colour rising in his cheeks. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never seen such naked fury on his face.
We had to take steps. We will stop them. The invaders must be repelled. I will not let them win. I will not let them. I will not. We must fight them. Alistair. Old friend. Fight them.
Conrad slipped away into unconsciousness and left me there in the room. I felt quite alone. When one sees a man, someone of noble character, reduced to a hollow shell of his former self, cannot help but look to your own mortality. And in that room, at that moment, I'm not ashamed to say I questioned my own resolve. Just for an instant. But the service allows no such introspection. It is a soldier's lot to do his duty and stand fast. And so I did, because my friend could not. I watched the dawn rise from the battlements of the castle, the sunrise casting dark pools of shadow in the lee of the towers. If anything, Kriegskind seemed even more forbidding in the early light of morning. I had not been able to return to sleep. Images of Conrad in his sickbed, the Romans and other less defined ghosts dogged me into wakefulness. Instead, I made a circuit of the base. The troops I encountered were units' usual panoply of men and women from across the globe, and all of them, every man jack of them, were afraid. The siege was well and truly upon us. On the ramparts, I learned from a guard that Schrader had ordered a lockdown across the base, closing off all entrances and cutting all lines of communication. We were isolated from the outside world. Focus narrowed to that most simple of military equations: attacker and defender. The parachute caught the glow of the sun, and they put a dozen guns upon it. I think the guards might have shot him down if I hadn't been there. Lower your weapons. That's an order. I had wondered how the doctor might respond to my message, and expected it to be in so direct a manner. "Ah, Brigadier," he said, tossing me his headgear. "Hold that while I extricate myself from this rig, would you? There's a good fellow." One could never say that the doctor did not have a keen eye for a theatrical entrance. While one of the guards rushed off to inform Schrader of the new arrival, I brought the doctor up to speed. He had a habit of appearing to be disinterested in everything I said, but I learned from experience that he took in every word. I knew his curiosity was piqued when he raised an eyebrow at the mention of the Romans. In that velvet coat and ruffles, he looked as if he was set for an evening at the theatre, and I could see Schrader's men were quite nonplussed. He had that effect on people. They didn't know what to make of him. For the lower ranks of unit, the Doctor was practically a myth, something that the non-coms spoke of like a campfire ghost story. But we had no need of that sort of thing here. There were quite enough real phantoms at Kriegskind. "I suspect," he began, "we are dealing with a time fracture, some form of irregularity bringing the Romans here from their original era." He shot me a withering stare. "This isn't a matter that can be solved with guns and violence, Brigadier. I hope you understand that." I ignored the jibe. Now, I don't claim to be a learned person, certainly not like the Doctor and Miss Shaw, but I've always prided myself on an unerring sense for the rightness and wrongness of things. I told him so. I couldn't shake the sense that there was something more to these incursions than just some odd slippage between the tracks of time. "Nonsense!" The Doctor's dismissal was quite offhand. "Solving this problem requires a cool and clinical mind, Brigadier. I would expect nothing less from you." Away he went, coat-tails flapping, brandishing that peculiar device of his into every nook and cranny. I, on the other hand, feeling neither cool nor clinical at that juncture, decided to pursue my own line of investigation. There was something that Conrad had said which kept rising to the front of my thoughts.
They died, Alistair. They all died. Only me now.
What did he mean? I came to the conclusion there was only one way to find out. The base mortuary had once been a crypt. I imagine the irony of that was not lost on the souls of those who were laid there. I hadn't been sure what I would find, victims of the previous incursions and the like. But as I pored over the files detailing the autopsies of the men in Conrad's command, I found something. There were sealed records here, going back several months. Men listed as lost in the line of duty, training accidents, so the official report said. It was a euphemism I was all too familiar with, one which I'd used myself on occasion. After all, how else does one explain to a widowed army wife that her husband was disintegrated by an alien cyborg or killed by a robotic yeti? Despite unit secrecy, or perhaps because of it, we are an organization that excels in producing paperwork. Forms for everything, from procurement of silver bullets to certificates for most unusual manners of death. I knew what to look for, and I found it. A cadre of men under Conrad's direct command assigned to a project with no name, only a code number. 995. A group of 6 men, including the colonel. All of them dead, except him. Each one with a toxicology report in their file. The majority of the jargon went over my head, but I recognized evidence of poisoning. Poison? Why the devil would Conrad expose his men, even himself, to a lethal toxin? I discovered the Doctor in the Great Hall, ignoring Schrader's men and sweeping about the chamber with increasing agitation. "Most peculiar, Brigadier," he told me. "I've conducted a scan for residual time particles, the sort that would be left embedded in the stone after a temporal shift in the local vicinity, and there's no sign of them. Not the slightest flicker." I resisted the temptation to say, "I told you so." He frowned. "But if these phantoms are not the product of a time corridor, then where else can we find a solution?" I offered him the files I had procured. "In here, perhaps, Doctor?" "Ah, the military mindset. Can't blow something up without a form signed in triplicate, eh?" I could swear to you that he only glanced at each page for a fraction of a second. But the look on the man's face showed me he'd seen the same incongruity I had. "It appears I owe you an apology, Lethbridge Stewart," he said after a moment. "See here." The Doctor ran a finger over a chemical analysis report. "These men were killed by the build-up of a foreign organic compound in their bloodstream." He shook his head. "If I had the TARDIS here, I'd be able to identify it in a flash." I took his meaning immediately. "Doctor, are you implying that this compound, or whatever it was, is non-terrestrial? He gave a slow nod. I've seen it before, but I can't place it. All I know for certain is that this chemical structure has strong psychoactive properties. Glanced to the bottom of the reports, and I saw Schrader's signature there on every one of them. The man had known about this all along and kept it from me. I couldn't be sure how this connected to the incursions, but once again, the Major had proved he knew more than he was admitting. My patience for the man was running thin. However, at that moment, matters conspired against us. "Brigadier," said the doctor, "do you feel that? A chill in the air? A smell like ozone?" I did. I was about to tell him so when the shooting started. The phantoms shimmered into being at the far end of the great hall. I had the Webley in my hand. This time I was ready. But these were not Roman legionaries. Not anymore. I recognized the uniforms immediately, those distinctive helmets and the rattle of the machine guns. Those are German soldiers from Earth's Second World War. The doctor pulled me aside as a rain of fire raked over the hall. But there's no time flux. How could they be here? Spectres, time shifts, whatever they were, their weapons were very, very real. The ghosts of warriors past were invading. Suddenly I understood what Conrad had meant. Time was against us. Discretion being the better part of valor and all that, and with only a few rounds left in the Webley, I encouraged the doctor to join me in a tactical withdrawal. And they came after us, of course. How do you fight an enemy that steps through walls as if they were not there? The soldiers emerged from the stonework and gained some measure of solidity before they attacked us. We gave as good as we got. In the confines of the corridor, I came closer to them than I wanted. Pallid and ashen faces stared back at me, expressionless and empty of anything that could be considered human. I fought men hand to hand and seen the anger and the panic in their eyes. Nothing of the sort here. But it was the silence that was most unsettling. They attacked without a cry, they perished without a sound, and their bodies became vaporous ash. And then nothing. "A psychoplasma matrix, perhaps," gasped the doctor. He seemed to pull these eccentric pieces of technical jargon from out of thin air. "Not n-dimensional. They could be protogenic matter, or possibly a form of doctor." As I said, insufferable at times. "This way." The medical ward was empty, what with the confusion and melee engulfing the castle elsewhere. Bringing the doctor to Conrad seemed to be the thing to do. If any man could fathom the depths of Heinrich's malady, it was him. But Conrad was getting worse. The doctor produced another of those Heath Robertson gadgets from his pockets and waved it at Conrad, gleaning some sort of meaning from the pattern of lights and sounds it produced. "I'm detecting elevated levels of that mystery compound in this man's blood." Pronouncement was quite grave. Much larger amounts than were recorded in those autopsy reports. He shouldn't be alive. Perhaps not, but Heinrich had always been a surprising fellow. Not one to give up easily. I think I might be able to bring him around for a moment. but it could do him more harm than good. I told him to do it. I was sure Conrad held the key to all of this. The doctor moved his device over Conrad's face, and for a moment I thought I saw a flash of the man I remembered. He stared at me.
Alistair, my good friend, I am so sorry. Please, you must forgive me.
Forgive you? For what, Heinrich? What have you done?
I was a fool to think we could control it. It's alien, Alistair. More alien than we could possibly imagine.
His words chilled the marrow in my bones. What had we stumbled across here? No sooner had he spoken than Conrad's brief moment of lucidity left him.
Fire and destruction. All of it burning down around us. The flames and the dead. The dead. The dead.
The doctor sighed. He slipped away again. His coherent mind can't maintain a grip on awareness. He's passing in and out of consciousness. I knew we had to find a way to help him. But any further discussion was forestalled by the arrival of Major Schrader and a cadre of his troops.
You men, take the colonel into the main medical lab, quickly!
What are you doing with him? Commanded the doctor. Schrader seemed unsettled by the doctor's appearance and directed his answers to me.
They are under a concerted attack from the invaders. Legionaries, 1940 soldiers, knights, barbarians. The colonel is being placed in a more secure location. The main lab is better protected.
From ghosts, Major? These incursions, as you call them, are taking place all over the castle. Nothing is secure anymore. I'd reached my limit with this man. My mistake had been to indulge him when I should have taken command the moment I arrived. I demanded an explanation, but he was unwilling to speak in front of the doctor.
I have read the unit briefings on this person. He is an extraterrestrial, a security risk.
I might have had my own issues with the doctor at that time, but I wasn't about to debate them with Schrader. Instead, I pressed the truth from him, and it was shocking. Even now, years later, to consider the scope of it makes my gut twist. To think that we were so afraid, that we were willing to cross that line. Kriegskins, as I said before, was as much a research center as it was a military base. Project 995 was one of their most clandestine ventures. It was, if you can believe it, a plant. Something discovered in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Alien in origin, and with a potential locked inside that dwarfed the most dangerous weapons in the world's arsenal.
Extracts from the plant form produced incredible enhancements in the mental and physiological abilities of test subjects. Kriegskind was chosen to conduct a series of human trials.
It's alien, Alistair. More alien than we could imagine.
All at once I understood. Conrad had chosen the test subjects himself. And because he would never allow his men to take a risk he was not willing to share, he had joined them. Heinrich had submitted himself for the testing. After attempts by the Great Intelligence, the Cybermen, the Null, the Silurians, and all the others that had tried to take Earth for themselves, we knew we were in an arms race. A fight to defend our planet against forces centuries in advance of our own. We needed weapons. But this...
We need to level the playing field, Alistair.
I recalled Conrad's words to me. We had met after a debrief at HQ following that unpleasant business with the Autons.
Assault rifles and grenades aren't enough. We need a new breed of soldier. One that can defeat an alien invader on their own terms.
Project 995 was nothing less than an attempt to create a super soldier. Conrad, and Schrader as well, both of them had come to believe that the only way to defend Earth was to modify human beings.
They knew the risks. No one was coerced. Every man understood what the project could mean for UNIT. They were proud to take part.
Your volunteers all died, didn't they? Said the doctor. All except the colonel. Then the incursion started, And you panicked, didn't you, Major?
Only Colonel Conrad remains from the original test group, and he must be kept safe. I believe the time shifts are the work of an alien aggressor force, clearly attempting to sabotage the project.
Schrader turned on the doctor, jabbing a finger at him.
He cannot be trusted. He may be an agent for the invaders, put here to gain our confidence. You have already allowed him to infiltrate units British operations, Brigadier.
Man was an utter fool. But as I was about to learn, a fool with his hand on the trigger.
I have taken steps to ensure that Kriegskind and Project 995 will not fall into the hands of the enemy.
My heart filled with dread. I knew what he would say next.
I have initiated an Arclight alert protocol.
Arclight. An operational command code word. I knew it well. Very well indeed. For my sins, it was my idea to create it in the first place. Fate, it seems, is not without a sense of irony. I railed at Schrader, but he was adamant that his choice was correct.
I am acting base commander, Brigadier. That is what we agreed, is it not? And as acting base commander, it is my right to enact any order I deem necessary. The authority falls to me.
It fell to me to explain the import of that word to the doctor. Arclight was a last-ditch solution, a fail-safe, our scorched earth policy. In the event that a unit facility was in danger of falling to enemy forces, or if something within it came to represent a threat to the world at large, an Arclight protocol would be initiated. If not rescinded within a set time limit, the base's location would be sanitized. The doctor was quite disgusted. And what exactly do you mean by sanitized, Brigadier? I searched my mind for another more palatable euphemism for wiped off the face of the earth, but I confess I couldn't think of one. We had a few hours, no more than 4 at the most, before a bomber airstrike obliterated the castle and everything else within a 2-mile radius. There was no end to them. Soldiers and swordsmen, legionaries and barbarians. For every one we put down, there were another 10 behind him. They came on in waves, one after another, in that deathly silence broken only by the sound of weapons and the screams of our men. It was as if history itself had broken into pieces and come to kill us. I left the doctor in the lab, where he worked at cobbling something together from a collection of equipment. I did the only thing I knew how to do well. I took the fight to the enemy. They pushed into us, and we fell back. First, beyond the ramparts, then to the walls of the keep, then into the corridors and the Great Hall. I purloined a radio from an unlucky sergeant who had fallen to an axe blow, and in vain I tried to raise someone, anyone, elsewhere in the facility. This is Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart to all stations. Report in. Give your status. Over. But no answer. Nothing but static. It dawned on me that the men standing with me, the men behind us and down in the labs, we were all that remained. And with each passing moment, our numbers were diminished. I gave the order then. Schrader was hiding on the lower levels. He wasn't there to countermand, and in truth, the troops by my side were looking to me for some sort of guidance. Fall back, men. Disengage and retreat to the medical labs. Sir, it was the Malay fellow, Ming, I think his name was. Sir, there's only one way in and out of that area. We'll be bottling ourselves up. Quite correct. But at least there, we could fortify our position. We withdrew, and I shot a glance at my watch. Not long now. Be a toss-up for who got us first. Even if I could convince Schrader to rescind the Arclight order, the Phantoms were a heartbeat behind us. The enemy, there at the gates. The doctor accosted me the moment I returned. He was brandishing a roll of paper scrawled with some sort of analytical gibberish. I have it, Brigadier, he told me. I've identified the plant recovered by unit. He showed me a string of numbers as if he thought I'd be able to recognize a pattern in them. It's a very rare extraterrestrial phylum from the galaxy M33. It drifts through space in a dormant condition and takes root on planets. It's quite benign in its normal state, although it contains psychotropic elements that can stimulate radical biological changes in humans. I asked him to define radical, and his expression became bleak. Psychic potential, Lethbridge Stewart. The development of uncontrolled mental ability. Powers of the mind. First it seemed like hogwash, but then was it any more peculiar than aliens and machine men? He answered my next question while it was still forming in my mind. The phantoms aren't coming from the past to the present, at least not in the literal sense. They're being conjured from the very stone of the castle itself. It was, he explained, like a captured echo. The doctor used a lot of long words, but the theory was this. Any ancient place captures some trace of the emotion spent within it, almost a psychic mark, if you will. If those energies are strong, they linger. The test subjects were all soldiers, every one of them attuned to the bloody business of warfare and battle. When this alien plant altered their minds, what latent psychic power lay within them reached out and drew the echoes of warriors past to them. Like called to like. The doctor was correct. The phantoms had not traveled from the past. They were already here, part of Kriegskin's history, in the stone walls all around us. But those men were dead. The plant had poisoned them. The doctor shook his head. Not all of them, Brigadier. The understanding turned my blood to ice. The incursions were being caused by a psychic force. A force resonating from the mind of the last surviving test subject of Project 995, Colonel Heinrich Conrad. Predictably, that Ash Schrader refused to believe a word of it. Clearly, the pressure of the unfolding situation had become too much for him. The men were uneasy. The chain of command breaks down when the lower ranks see the officer corps arguing amongst themselves, and the major barked out his denials, his demeanor straying toward the manic.
The doctor is an alien. How can you, an unit officer, trust him? He is an invader in waiting. I am not taken in by him, Brigadier. I will not countermand the Arclight order on the words and assurances of this person. My decision is final. I will not leave Earth open to attack, even if you are willing to take the risk.
He had signed a death warrant for us all, and I knew then that nothing I could say or do would change his mind. I spoke about fear before. Schrader had given into it, let it rule his every waking moment. The doctor was never one to suffer fools gladly, but even he saw that the situation here was balanced on a knife edge. Undeterred, always unwilling to admit defeat, he went to work on the snarls of wires and components he had gutted from the medical equipment. This doesn't have to end in blood and fire, he insisted. I can create a psionic counterwave. It may be enough to halt the phantoms. And while he worked like the devil himself, on the off chance he was wrong, I rallied the men and reloaded my Webley. I'd be damned if I wasn't going to go down fighting. The aircraft were already in the sky, vectoring in towards the castle. I reviewed the standard operating plan in my thoughts. Arclight called for a pair of F-4 fighter bombers with a strike configuration. They would each be carrying a single fuel-air explosive bomb. Second to a tactical nuclear warhead, it was the most lethal munition we could commit to the field. Deployed against Kriegskind, they would turn the base into a mound of smoldering rubble. I still had the radio handset on me. Perhaps I might have been able to reach the pilots. But what could I tell them without the abort code? Arclight was a zero option. It was not designed to be stopped. Schrader would not cancel the order, and the only other man who could countermand him, the base commander-in-chief, was in his sickbed, his mind collapsing in on itself. I set the bulwark at the doors to the medical wing. Hold fast. The lull in their attacks had ended. They were advancing once again, silent and slow down the corridors. Riflemen, suppressing fire. Short control bursts. 5 rounds rapid on my command. Open fire. We met them with courage, and they threw it back at us. Now I knew what these things were. I found myself searching the faces of the blank-eyed ghosts, hoping to find some of Conrad peering out at me. But no, nothing of the sort. Only cold, emotionless killers. The past's pain and bloodshed ripped from history and made flesh. And now they wanted to claim us as well. That thought chilled me, that we might become new additions to their ranks. Conrad and I haunting this place until the end of time. I shook it off. Phantoms were thinning, fading into the walls instead of facing us head-on. Schrader! I sprinted back into the ward and saw him, impaled on the Roman sword, crying out his last. Too late, I saw that the enemy had shifted their tactics. They were flanking us, striding through stone to catch us unawares. We beat them back, but the Major's life was forfeit. He died there, and Commander Kriegskind and the handful of men who stood about his body abruptly became mine. It wasn't a turn of events I relished. We regrouped and waited for the end. I found myself listening for the noise of jet engines, wondering if the sound would even reach us inside the castle walls. I would have voiced my worries if I'd been alone. Instead, I kept the men on an even keel. I marked the time. Not long now.
The war, all wars, all blurring into one. The fire and the blood, the legacy of the past, claim the future.
Now then, Heinrich, you're upsetting the men.
They're coming, Alistair. You can't stop them.
You see them? Out there. In here. In my mind. The war. The wars. The blood. Ah!
I wanted to give him respite, something to ease the pain. But there was no cure. The alien plant had meshed itself into his body, changing him irrevocably, just as it had the other men. Only Conrad, by some quirk of biology, had been strong enough to survive it, losing his mind in the process.
They're here!
And so they were. From every angle they struck us. Swords, axes, maces, and machine guns. They were impossible to miss. They were impossible to escape. I contemplated it for an instant. A single round remained in the weaponless chamber. Conrad, there before me, his tortured mind, the unwilling source for all the death and destruction that had happened at Kriegskind. Take the life of an enemy was one thing. But good Lord, could I kill a man in cold blood? A comrade in arms? My friend? Could I take his life and hope he would end this madness? Brigadier! The doctor's voice brought me back to the moment. He brandished a jury-rigged device in his fist. I can hold them. It might have looked more like a piece of modern art than any sort of workable contrivance. But when the doctor flipped a switch, the damn thing worked. They stopped, every one of them. Swords raised in the killing blow, guns at our heads. All the phantoms became statues frozen in time. I dared to reach out a hand and touch one of them, snatched back my fingers a split second later. They were cold, a deep chill I felt right down to my bones. Success, he said with a fierce grin. The counterwave is working. It's nullified the effect of the psychic field inside the castle. Better late than never, I replied. Mentally, I was still ticking off the seconds until Arclight. It was only minutes away. Of course, the doctor neglected to mention that the wave was highly unstable. "Those bombers are still on their way, Brigadier," he said, "and I'm not sure how long this device will remain operable." He gestured to the surviving soldiers. "You have to get these men out while you still can." He wasn't going to leave. I heard it in the tone of his voice. The machine, his cobbled-together creation, needed someone to hold it in check, like a finger holding back the falling hammer of a pistol, but only for so long. I told him to give it to me, not to be a fool. He was far more valuable to UNIT, well, let's be honest, to the whole bloody universe, than one brigadier. Insufferable man. Wouldn't hear of it. "Someone has to stay behind, and I can survive dying a lot better than you can."
No, I will do it.
Heinrich? It was some side effect from the counterwave. However it happened, the device had allowed some measure of the man Conrad was to come back to us. He was granted a brief moment of lucidity. "Heinrich, are you all right?"
Alistair. Doctor, this is my responsibility. I brought all this to pass. I thought we could defeat our enemies by becoming like them. But instead, all I did was unleash an even greater threat. The uncontrolled pain and horror of 1,000 battles.
Arclight. The bombers are still coming.
Yes, I know. Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, I am reassuming my post as base commander. As ranking officer, I order you to immediately evacuate my men and the doctor from Kriegskind base.
Understood, Colonel Conrad.
Go on, old friend. Don't look back.
It was an order. I made it. Every phantom we encountered was stock still, faces blank in death. We moved as fast as we could, and we didn't look back. None of us wanted to admit that we saw new additions to the army of spectres, men in unit kit, walking shades that mimicked those that died in the castle. The F4s came from the south, as I expected they would, up along the line of the river. The doctor took the radio from me. "Conrad has to call them off," he insisted. "Attention," he called. "Colonel, we're out of the castle. Your men are safe. You can stand down the attack."
Arclight, respond. This is Kriegskind Actual. Code Black 7-1.
The doctor asked me what that meant. Was that the abort code? No. It was anything but that. Anything but that. Kriegskind and Conrad perished together. There is some cold comfort in that, I suppose. Heinrich no doubt appreciated the irony of it in those last moments before the firestorm swept in. The phantoms vanished with him. Every trace of the alien plant was atomized along with all the other research materials. After the fact, I made it my concern to ensure the whole sorry business was committed to a sealed file. This would never happen again. Not while I was in unit, not while I had anything to say about the matter. In his rush to protect his world, Conrad let his judgment slip. Propelled by fearful men like Schrader, he had made the wrong decision and paid for it. Ash began to rain down around us as the flames took hold on the hillside, and beside me, the doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. "Alistair," he said, with true sadness, "I'm so sorry about your friend. The choice he made." Yes, the choice he made. In the end, that's what it all came back to. Conrad's choices at Kriegskind. My choices at Wenley Moor. We had both done what we thought to be right, and both of us had to weather the consequences, no matter what price they exacted. So, absent friends, choices made, and the consequences thereof. When the next threat comes to this planet, and it will, we will not defeat it by becoming the things that we fear. We will not defeat it by making ourselves as alien as our enemies. If we sacrifice everything that we are, then there's nothing worth defending anymore. Our sword and our shield will be the one thing that makes us unique. Our humanity. If a man loses sight of that, he loses sight of himself. It's important we remember, never forget, absent friends, comrades in arms, old soldiers.
Coming soon from Big Finish.
You know of the lost world.
These are my final days. The world that I came to call my home is gone, and with it, everything that stood between me and death.
If you are so afraid, go back to your mama and your table manners and your stale meat.
I'm not afraid.
What is it? The end of the world? Could be.
I have seen so much.
You will remain where you are, Homo sapien.
Finally, I grow old. Yes, but I am enlightened and unafraid.
You're a nothing. A worthless female of your species who has no use as a soldier and has been kept alive for one reason. The Zednai require information, and you will provide it.
Mr. Courtney.
Mr. Fairs, how nice to see you.
And you. And how nice to be reunited with the Brigadier again.
It is indeed. It's a long time from St. Martin's. Oh, no, sorry. Talking about different matter, aren't we? Yes. Yes, indeed it is. Nice story. I enjoyed the story.
It's good fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
It actually goes a little into the mental stuff behind the Brigadier. You know, the
Yes, yeah.
questions his...
The questions he asked himself, which you probably haven't seen so much of in previous television appearances, maybe. Usually he's just getting on with it. But yeah, the questions he asked himself. It was nice stuff.
Did ever any of this stuff occur to you that the Brigadier might actually not just be following orders during all that?
Well, it's based on the fact that he obviously was very good mates with this man, Conrad. He obviously held him in huge high esteem. And when he heard a cry for help, he thought, I think the Brigadier decided to do it himself, actually, without waiting for orders. Well, I suppose he could he had a certain amount of latitude to do what he wanted. So he didn't, for example, you remember in other stories, he often disobeyed British army generals and went his own way. So I think he did it because he liked this man a lot and was a bit and felt he needed some help. So he went a lot to help him, I think. Yeah.
So it actually does carry on through the logic of the character.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Now, today we've not only been reunited with the Brig, of course, we've been reunited with the Third Doctor.
With the Third Doctor.
Uncannily, you managed to channel.
Well, I managed to channel. I like that word, channel. Yes, well, I've never forgotten. I think it's, we both know, of course, the best impersonator of John Pertwee is a great friend of his called Stuart Mully, who's a great friend of mine as well. And I think it's having heard Stu Mully when he's had a couple of vodkas or something. He does wonderful John Pertwee. And indeed, he rang up once my home, and I was convinced it was Pertwee speaking.
Gosh.
And it wasn't, it was Stu Mully. And the next time the phone rang and he said it was John Pertwee, I said, oh, "Oh, come off it, Stu, I know it's you." And it wasn't, it was John Pertwee. So that's how close they were. Yes, one doesn't forget John and his various modes of delivery, I could put it that way. And they sort of just came back, so I thought I must lighten and try and get them as near as I can without going too far. Yeah.
Now, we've had Peter Purvis in to do a Hartnell, and he relied on a sort of little
yes,
that Hartnell had.
Right.
We had Fraser Hines doing Pat Troughton, and he pointed out to me that there was a little cough that Patrick Troughton used to do, apparently, when the lines perhaps weren't quite forthcoming. And I noticed while you were doing your Pertwee that there was some hand gesturing going.
Oh, was there?
Yes,
that was unconscious. That was unconscious. I wasn't realised about it. Otherwise, I'd have done a bit more of this, because he used to like scratching his face a lot, John. I mean, he'd always, when he was thinking about a line, he may well have known it, but he was thinking how to answer a line. He would often do a lot of chin underneath or round the neck, scratching, which was very endearing. One always knew one of John's favourite gestures, scratching his face.
No, I've heard a story. Is it apocryphal that actually sometimes he had the lines written on his cuffs?
Well, I mean, no, I don't think that's true. I think that's people being a bit naughty. I think I was doing a DVD yesterday for. We were talking with Peter Davison and Mark Strickson, and I think it was Eric Sayward who was one of the script editors, who said that there had been a rumour that John, point of fact, the set had to be changed along the wrong sets were there, and then John was in a terrible state because he had his lines written around the set. But that is exaggerated. Actually, he didn't have them as bad. I mean, there were certain lines he found very difficult to say, a lot of scientific gobbledygook, so he'd say, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow, which is a very famous one, which happens in many stories. I mean, later, as you know, Peter Davison says that in one line, in both, I think, in the Five Doctors and all, Mordred. No, I don't think he had them. I never saw him look at his cuffs. I don't think he might say, as I did once, as Fraser Hines has pointed out about me, when I didn't know what the next line was, I was to look up the director and say, am I in the right place? You know, so when I say this line, to give myself a moment. And I think John, from time to time, if something was particularly causing him difficulty, he might say, I'm awfully sorry, someone was in my eye line there. So that they'd have to do it again and give him a moment to recoup.
And I suppose the brig never got any sort of scientific.
Not too much of scientific stuff. He would just look full of incomprehension, probably, of what you say. Well, yes, if you say so, Doctor, or something like that. He would just sort of accepted the Doctor knew. No, I didn't have too many. No, it was John who had the Doctor who had the scientific stuff to say, and sometimes his assistants, of course. No, it's very good to see you again, and I'm glad to have done this. I enjoyed it very much. I like doing narration. I enjoy it very much.
You've got the voice for it. Some people have a face for radio, but you
a face for radio. I like it. That's brilliant, Nigel. I never thought I must remember that. Some people have a face for radio. That's excellent. Nice. That's very good. Thank you.
You interest me, 270G. You dress like a noblewoman, and yet you lack something. Something every one of our guests shows within minutes of walking through that door. Fear. You're not afraid of me.
You are right. I do not fear you, and I am not your guest.
Maybe not.
Speak plainly. I am your prisoner, and this is an interrogation. At the end of it, one of us will be dead.
Yes. And I will have the information that I need. There is a world, a lost world, the stuff of legends, of fairy tales. But not to you, 270G.
I do not understand you.
There is little point in lying to me. This room is monitored with devices so sensitive and precise that they can detect the slightest change in your skin temperature or heartbeat. You know of the lost world. You know of its people. Should you lie to me, I can administer as much or as little pain as I require. You know of the lost world. Are you still not afraid, noble woman?
I am no noble woman, and you are no warrior to face your enemy on uneven terms. I challenge you to remove your armor, and then we shall see which of us is afraid.
You're not my enemy. You're a nothing. A worthless female of your species who has no use as a soldier and has been kept alive for one reason. The Zednai require information, and you will provide it.
These are my final days.
You will tell me
The world that I came to call my home is gone, and with it, everything that stood between me and death.
We know you walked with Hein.
Since I was brought to this place, every day my body has aged a year. I'm not afraid. Thanks to the doctor and to his people, I have lived longer than I ever dreamed possible. I have seen so much. Finally, I grow old. Yes, but I am enlightened and unafraid. On the world where I was born, there was a place that only the mightiest of warriors were allowed to go. A place revered even by the elders of my tribe, the Sevatim. They gave it a name, the Trofaroon. My mother told me stories about it when I was a child. She described it to me, a cavern in the very depths of the forest, where the ancient founders of the Sevatim had buried the remains of our first and most noble warrior. After every battle, lost or won, our forefathers had taken a symbol of the battle to the cave, an enemy skull, a weapon, a severed limb. And now the Trofaroon was so glutted with spirits of the dead that the forest itself rang with their howling. Long before I was cast out of the Sevatim for blasphemy, I went there. I wanted to see the spirits of my ancestors, to hear their screams. I wanted to talk to them, to understand why they had taken my mother from me when she had served Zoannon all her life and never spoken ill of anyone, alive or dead. But I heard nothing, and saw only a cave full of dirt and old bones, and a metal sign like one of Neva's holy relics. On it were words, just shapes to me then, but I remembered them. Years later, The doctor decided to teach me to write, and I showed him the words. Trophy room, he told me. What is that? I asked. He circled the wooden desk at the center of the room thoughtfully, flicking switches. Eventually he stopped and smiled at me. Somewhere to keep cups, he said. Cups? Cricket cups, swimming cups, certificates, statues, that kind of thing. I've got one somewhere. Do you have many cups, Doctor? I asked. Oh, hundreds, he smiled. Remind me to show you one day. But first, we're going to dinner. It's about time I taught you some table manners. The doctor had set me free from the ignorance and superstitions of the Sever team. I did not know it then, but from what I have learned of him since, I believe he saw in me a kindred spirit. He too had rejected the rigid beliefs of his people. He too had dreamed of stepping onto other worlds, breathing strange new air and seeing the wonders of the universe. My people refused to believe that there could be life beyond their world. The Time Lords knew it existed, but preferred to observe rather than touch it, feel it as he did. The doctor let me travel with him, but there was a price. He wanted to educate me. He wanted to change me from a savage into what was it? An Eliza Doolittle. This meant no hunting, learning to read, write, and, most importantly, how to hold a knife and fork. This I did not do well. Well, really. We were sitting at the table of Lord Douglas, a straight-backed man with an absurd moustache, and Lady Douglas, a straight-backed woman who had a nose like a hawk. Their tiresome daughter, Jessica, giggled every time I spoke or moved. Had the doctor not forbidden me to carry them, I would have happily stabbed her with a Janus thorn. That would have shut her up. A strange old man with the face of a corpse had served our food. He stooped to pick up my fork, which had fallen to the floor, and frowned as I carved a large chunk of meat from the carcass with his larger and more effective knife. This meat has no taste, I complained. The animal was too old when you killed it. Remembering the doctor's words about cleanliness in Edwardian England, I wiped my hands on the tablecloth, which prompted another outburst from the daughter. Jessica, Lady Douglas hissed, like a hoarder. This one's got a bit of pluck on her, Doctor, Lord Douglas said, smiling. Where did you pick her up from? My name is Leela of the Sever team, I announced. And you, I pointed the knife at the girl, are extremely annoying. Jessica and Lady Douglas gasped. Lord Douglas laughed, slapping his hand on the table. You tell her, old girl, he guffawed. Joshua, said Lady Douglas, I will not countenance a member of my family being spoken to in that manner in my house. Williams, she addressed the corpse man without looking at him, I want you to take Miss Leela down to the servants' hall. I think it would be more appropriate for her to dine there. I stood. Is the meat in the servants' hall fresher than this? I asked corpse man, who seemed too shocked to answer. If it is, I shall eat there. If it is not, I shall hunt for my own supper. The doctor, who'd been strangely silent during the meal, made no attempt to stop me as I sheathed the knife and stormed out of the room. Looking back defiantly, I saw him lean forward and, staring at Lord Douglas, say, Joshua, we need to talk. The house smelt of decay, of dust, dying plants in unnaturally shining pots. Long, narrow corridors lined with wood and heavy curtains. Paintings of straight-backed men and women who all looked as dead as Williams. If this was truly what the doctor wished me to become, then I was having none of it. I froze as a distant sound filled me. Williams shuffled on ahead. Without even a breath, I drew the knife and waited for the sound to come again. But there was none. Then the silence was broken by the irritating twittering of the women emerging from the dining room.
Well,
Said Lady Douglas, catching sight of me.
there she is, carving knife and all.
Jessica let out a small shriek.
Remember what your father said?
Lady Douglas warned.
Oh, Mama, do I have to? She's so ghastly.
Jessica? Her mother snapped, and pouting, the girl walked over to me. Lady Douglas nodded and strutted upstairs.
My father wants me to show you the house and gardens.
Jessica sighed.
He seems to think we can learn from each other.
There is nothing you can teach me, I replied. Jessica nodded.
I agree entirely. But Papa and your uncle seem to think it was a good idea, so who are we to argue? We're only women after all.
You mean no females disagree with the men of your tribe? I asked her, remembering the shouting matches I'd had with Thomas and my father as a child. Then how do you learn? Jessica looked shocked, again.
We learn by example. And from books, of course. Do you have a favourite author? My father insists that I should read Mr. Hardy's work, but to be honest, I prefer Mr. Kipling's.
The doctor is teaching me to read about two very stupid children who have a dog and a ball, I told her, and then changed the subject. What is down there? I pointed towards the floor. Jessica looked puzzled.
Only the servants' hall and the cellars, she replied. Why?
Something is trapped down there. I felt its pain. Take me down there. Jessica's eyes widened.
I'm not allowed downstairs, and even if I was, I wouldn't go. It wouldn't be right.
Because your father has said so, I suggested.
No,
Jessica replied, and for the first time I sensed a little sadness in her voice.
Papa would be the first to encourage me to mix with the servants. Since he returned from his trip, his views have become somewhat eccentric. Mamma despairs of him sometimes. I think she blames your uncle and his friends, if truth were told.
The doctor is not my uncle, and I do not understand how your father's views can be his fault. Jessica's eyes widened further.
You mean you didn't know?
She asked. Did not know what? The girl was trying my patience more than ever.
About their trip.
Your father travelled with the doctor?
Not him, no, she replied. The man he went with was much older, but he was also a doctor, and he also carried a blue box with him. I think they must be in some kind of gentleman's society. The journey changed Papa in so many ways. He was only gone for a year, but when he returned, Papa looked 10 years older. His hair was grey, his skin darker, his clothing most peculiar, and he even spoke in an English neither of us understood. I would never dream of telling Mamma, but Jeanette, that's my lady's maid, she said that they hadn't gone to Peru at all, but that your uncle, that the doctor had bewitched him.
Then Jeanette is stupid, I said. Now, show me how to get down there. After a little more whining, I persuaded Jessica to take me down to the servants' hall, a small, dark room with a large wooden table and metal cooking devices that were still warm to the touch. Two young girls, dressed in black and white, whispered to each other as we walked into the room. Ignoring Jessica's protests, I opened another door, which revealed a dark, narrow corridor. The walls were made of damp stone. The air was cold. This was where the cry had come from, without a doubt.
You can't go in there,
Jessica squealed from behind me.
Nobody's allowed in there, not even the servants. Leela, if Papa or Williams catches us...
I do not understand you, I interrupted. This is your home, and yet there are rooms you cannot enter. Your father has changed, and yet you do not question him. You obey men without protest, even when you know they are wrong. Then, seeing the fear in her eyes, I softened. If you truly wish to learn, then join me. Learn not through reading, but through experience. There was a thick red curtain at the end of the corridor. I drew it aside to reveal a dark wooden door. What's behind this? Jessica, who had followed me, looked afraid.
Nobody knows. Nobody dares go in there. Jeanette said that the last maid to go in there never came out.
There is someone in there, I whispered.
But there can't be, Jessica argued.
Did you not hear the cry?
There.
She shook her head.
I didn't hear anything, Leela. I'm frightened.
I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I asked Jessica where the key was.
There isn't one,
She trembled.
Jeanette says that it's locked from the inside. She says that the maid locked herself in with the only key and that at night you can hear her clawing against the door, trying to get out.
I told you before, Jeanette is stupid. If the maid had the only key, then she would not try to claw her way out. She would use it to open the door. This did not comfort Jessica, who had started to emit little sobbing noises that were almost as annoying as her giggling had been. Feeling the howling from behind the door surge through me once again, I pushed past Jessica into the kitchen where, to her horror, I picked up a large axe lying beside a neat pile of firewood. Returning quickly to the door, I swung the axe and broke it down. The room beyond the broken door was pitch black and felt even colder than the corridor, though less damp. There was a rancid smell I did not recognize. Jessica did.
Mothballs,
she whispered. We need to see what is in here. I will fetch a stick from the fire.
There's no need,
said Jessica. The room suddenly filled with a flickering bright light. Jessica seemed surprised to see the long glowing tubes on the ceiling. She gazed at them as if she'd never seen anything like them before. They revealed a small room filled to the very edges with a strange assortment of things. Upside down on a small table in front of us was a shining metal cup. I lifted it from the table and presented it to Jessica, who read it nervously.
Nova Scotia Swimming Championship, 1953. First prize, 400 meters. Joshua Douglas.
Jessica seemed confused.
Why would my father have made such a thing? Was it for a play?
Putting down the cup, she picked up a wooden frame and added,
And these buildings, I've seen many photographs of Peru in picture books, but none of them looked remotely like this.
She held up a likeness of her father and an old man with white hair standing in front of tall metal buildings that looked like something the Tesh might have built. Is it not obvious? I replied. The doctor took your father to another world and another time. And this room is where he keeps his certificates and cups. It is his trophy room. Now, are you going to help me find whoever is trapped down here or not? After telling me that I was
quite mad,
Jessica protested that there was no room to trap anyone down here, and I admitted that she may be right. There were small boxes lined with dust, piles of papers, long sticks tied together with rope, faded maps of cities and continents, and a heap of old material, but no sign of anything alive. Yet still the cry lingered within me like a shadow. Thinking there might be another room concealed beyond this one, I started to throw things aside.
Stop it! If Papa hears us...
Great, Zoannon! If you are so afraid, go back to your mamma and your table manners and your stale meat, I shouted impatiently and carried on. When I reached the wall and found no secret door or hidden panel, I sat, defeated and sulking, picking at the floorboards with my knife. Jessica watched me from the other side of the room.
Are you a suffragette?
She asked. I do not think so, I replied. Why?
You dress like a lady of class, but you don't behave like one. Mamma calls the suffragettes an abomination of nature. She and Papa had the most terrible last week. Mrs. Harker Brown, who's an old friend of the family,